Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm, where social outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all around nerds convene, talk, and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the Nerdy Occultist, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Hello, everybody.
And I am your host, slash Timeline Wannabe, the Brains from Pop Culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I am doing okay. It's been hot and miserable all day, though. It reminds me why I really don't like summer very much. My kingdom for fall and winter, I swear to God.
All right, I'm just
Anyway,
waiting.
moving on.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the article to load. So I watched on Monday, last Monday, I watched Mission Impossible: Final Reckoning, and I know Dalton's not the biggest Mission Impossible fan. Um, but I like Mission Impossible. Mainly, I got into it like during Ghost Protocol and after that, so I'm not really familiar with the original trilogy. Um, but yeah, no, it's good. I think it's a good like send off for the franchise.
Hmm. I'm in roughly the same place with Mission Impossible as I am with the Fast and Furious. I know it must be popular because there's like a dozen of the
Okay,
movies, but
that's no okay, Don. I'm gonna say this. Don't ever compare those two.
is there is there some like war between the fandoms there?
No, they're just not comparable because Mission Impossible is far better.
If you say so.
I will bitch slap the fuck out of you.
I already said if you say so. What more do you want from me? God damn it!
I want you to stop being a negative motherfucker all the time. But I realize that's a bit of an ask.
That 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 is unlikely to happen. More things have to be more consistently positive before I'm willing to adjust my algorithms
Okay,
accordingly.
I'm curious. What is the last Mission Impossible movie you watched? Just out of genuine curiosity, because I feel
I
like that's
haven't.
biased.
I
Okay,
have not seen a single one of them,
okay, and
nor have I seen any of the Fast and Furious movies. To me, they've always seemed kind of interchangeable.
so how do you not? So how do you know if you don't like it if you have not actually watched it?
I gather enough from the trailers that I would not like them.
And
I
hold
tried
on.
to experiment with something I knew I wouldn't like once before. That was the Jason Bourne franchise, and I regret deeply and implicitly that I ever bothered with that shit.
Okay, but I'm sorry. That just feels incredibly narrow-minded and frankly stupid.
Again, like to me, they're just sort of interchangeably existent action movies. Again, I'm sure they're popular enough because well, there's a dozen of them each, but like
Okay, but you I forget who I'm talking to, but also genuinely that feels very ass backwards. Because if you're not actually, because for one thing, trailers can suck. I think we all know that. So I
right,
think,
but they all
hold on.
seem
Can I
to
get my
suck
point
in the.
across first?
Go ahead.
Sorry, I just, I think for one thing, again, I would say skip the first trilogy of movies just because they're not as they're a bit how to say this. You might like them maybe because they're very quote unquote experimental, but Fast and Furious I don't particularly like because it's just it doesn't really have a consistency about it.
Okay.
Fast and Furious does have that consistency, but again, I would say in later movies, um, and has for one thing, most of it is practical work that's done, and it also has really engaging characters, storylines, and just generally a like a well-made series of movies. Um, so I think the fact that you have not actually experienced one movie is at the very least a flawed perspective on your part. If you're just don't get me wrong, I know we've covered trailers to bad movies that have been bad, but I think basing it off the trailer is and is a bit short-sighted on your part.
They seem like very
Okay, see, you keep saying they seem, and you're not saying they
okay,
are.
but I'm not gonna waste 14 hours of my life catching up on two franchises that I know are
I'm
not
not
in
saying okay.
any
For one thing,
way
I'm not
in
saying.
the
Hold on, can
genre.
I? I'm not saying Fast and Furious or anything because I don't give a shit about Fast and Furious. I'm just saying Mission Impossible, like specifically Mission Impossible. Okay, but my point is, and I'm not saying devote yourself or anything to it. Watch one if you're interested. Watch more. That's kind of always been my thing.
I
But
I haven't seen anything from any of them that makes me think even even giving it one try is warranted. It's like generic spy action movie versus generic car action movie that also progresses into spying eventually. Like I don't
and what the fuck is James Bond then?
James Bond, at least when it's not being stupidly self-serious and trying to rip off Jason Bourne, even though James Bond came first, is a pulp franchise. And that plus the like Britishism of it makes it worthwhile. Same thing how the thing that draws me to John Wick is the luxury and the hospitality politicking of things like the High Table and the Continental, not the shooting and shit. Whereas I don't think there's anything equivalent to any of there's very little pulpiness a la James Bond. And as far as I'm aware, there's no hospitality politicking in either franchise.
Okay.
And
I
action
still
movies
think
by
that's a.
themselves don't sell
I'm
me.
sorry, Don. I still think that's a very flawed perspective you have.
Okay, but again, did you forget who you're talking to? I have very particular hangups that make me interested or not interested in things, and both Mission Impossible and Fast and
Okay, can we shut the
Furious.
fuck up about Fast and Furious? I don't care. This specific. I
Okay,
realize your comparison of it. I realize your
no,
comparison of it,
but here's the thing. You don't seem to understand that I extend that lack of care to Mission Impossible as well. You can
no, I
understand why I
get
don't give
that.
a shit about Fast and Furious, but you can't seem to understand that I basically hold both of those franchises in the same box, and
I think,
I
and
don't see it.
that's my problem is that you're. That there lies my problem is that you're comparing them both as if they're the same. And don't get me wrong, I get that it's your perspective you view them as the same, but I think it's flawed in the fact
As
maybe
as
that's
far
just me.
as far as I'm concerned, One of these is a late 90s, early 2000s franchise with spies, and one of these is a late 90s, early 2000s franchise with cars. And neither of which I find particularly interesting because I'm not into generic action movies for the most part. Like, for me to be invested in an action movie, they have to have something else about them that gets me invested. Like with John Wick, it's the luxury porn and the hospitality politicking. With James Bond, it's the pulp detective novel thing mixed with a little bit of the classic British style. Um, I do, there's nothing extra about either Fast and Furious or Mission Impossible for me to grab onto.
Like, I will agree with Fast and Furious, but again, I think your perspective on Mission Impossible is flawed. And I think we're just going to keep going around in a circle if we continue.
Anyway, moving on to tonight's first story. Because
I still think, and I think Dolan's wrong as fuck, but whatever.
my dislike of generic action movies is well known.
It's not. I'm gonna. The fact that you think Mission Impossible is generic is my problem as well, but we're not going to continue because I'm not going to convince you because you are a stubborn ass.
To be fair, it was one of the pioneers of its formula, but because it was as successful as it was, it became the template for a whole series of action movies that I don't particularly care for, and that's part of the reason why
Okay,
I know
I
wouldn't like it because
stop.
I've seen I've seen a bunch of the movies that tried to rip the formula off, and I didn't like any of those. At least the Ocean franchise has the heist thing, which can sometimes work for me.
We're going to stop here because honestly I feel like this might be the thing that makes me snap.
Okay.
Anyway. The fuck? Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is originally from worldofreal.com. Superman faced major changes after test screenings, reshoots, less humor, shorter runtime, new editor, and composer. This was published May 7, 2017. Sorry. I am tired and also it's hot as fuck right now. I don't... So, sorry. I don't know why the fuck... Published May 27th, 2025. Written by Jordan Ryumi? I apologize if I got named wrong. I'm not good at reading names unless they're said to me first. Cue obligatory Dolan defending me by saying I mispronounced his name for months and him not saying a damn thing.
Well, because I thought it would be rude to mention it.
It's ruder if you don't, and I find out later, which I did.
Fair play.
I felt like an asshole, by the way, when you told me, because I was mispronouncing your name for what, 5 months? Before you said something?
In my defense, I got used to people mispronouncing my name because you would not believe how many people over the years have mispronounced my name for various stupid reasons. There's also the tendency of people to misspell it because apparently there's a version of the name Dalton that you can spell with a Y. Don't ask me how the fuck that works, but
no, but I always said your last name wrong. That was the thing.
And that's not new. That's not new either. For some reason, most people when they read it for the first time read it as Mortimer instead of Mortimer.
I could have sworn I was saying Mortimer the whole time.
You were not. I think you stuck a random L in it for no reason, as far as I can remember. Anyway, my cat wants out. I was hoping he would stay in the room because the door needs to be closed so the dog doesn't get in, but he appears to not be being patient. Give me 1
Okay.
second.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, back.
All right. Yes, Dawn sent me this one. After today's reveal of the Superman runtime, sorry, I'm looking up the runtime because I don't remember hearing about that. 2 hours and 9 minutes. I don't. I'm not one for overly long runtimes, but feels a bit short, right?
Especially if you're going to be establishing a whole universe in it, more or less, and especially if there's like 6 other superhero characters you have to at least give time to cameo in.
I mean, if they can do it efficiently, sure. But I feel a lot like the least amount because on average, most movies are 2.5 hours long, right?
Yeah,
like
they're about 220 to 230. They're about.
Yeah. At most, I'd say 2:15 if you wanted to make this movie relatively short.
Well, okay, so let's say for the sake of argument that all the other superhero characters get maybe 3 minutes apiece for cameo's sake, and there's like 6 or 7 of them, so 6 minutes, or yeah, 6 characters, 3 minutes apiece. That's 18 minutes out of the movie that's going to be devoted entirely to something other than establishing Superman and Superman's mythos and supporting cast and rogues gallery and so on. Never mind that you also probably are going to have to tie in other things relating to the DCEU's continuity because of, obviously James is going to want the whole idea of this franchise is he wants to make a universe that's already lived in, and this is the first big screen movie that's showing that, so they're going to have to devote at least some of the movie to that as well. So that gives what, like 80, 90 minutes for Superman and only Superman related stuff at most, which again, you can technically do a movie in 90 minutes, but it's probably going to wind up feeling rushed, especially because we already have to, like, the existence of the Fortress of Solitude has to be established, the existence of Crypto has to be established. Presumably, they're going to want to set Kara because they're doing the Supergirl movie eventually, assuming this doesn't crash and burn. And whatever else they do with Luthor and rumor has it potentially Brainiac might be being set up as well, and then there's the actual like main crux of the movie where Luthor makes Ultraman, and then they have the fight and so on. So like, there's a lot of moving parts here for a very comparatively short runtime, is what I'm saying.
Okay. Okay, let me reread that. After today's reveal of the Superman runtime, the real story might be what's happening behind the scenes. I started asking around and uncovered that the road to release has been anything but smooth for DC Studios' flagship reboot. Yeah,
We've been covering this for months, almost a year actually. Like
I
it
think
seems like it seems like every time there is a new story regarding the new DCU, it's we both look at each other and go, "Are they sure they know what they're doing?" Because it always feels like every decision they make is a one of the most worst half-assed decisions they possibly could make, and B, like they're just throwing random shit at the wall to hope that some of it sticks. And of course, James keeps putting his foot in his mouth, which worries me.
okay. Sources close to production. Oh, sorry. Tensions are high at Warner Brothers, where CEO David Zaslav and DC Studios James Gunn and Peter Safran leads James Gunn and Peter Safran are scrutinizing every frame to avoid franchise misfire. It's kind of already been done, to be fair.
Yeah, and honestly, micromanaging it doesn't. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't. I just want to say it was already a shake. The foundation was already rocky to begin with, given everything. Um, and for the record, I also want to point this out. I really don't want this to fail. I'll be fully honest. I hope we're wrong. I hope all of
Yeah,
our.
I want to be wrong. Same as I wanted to be wrong with Multiverse of Madness, and same as I wanted to be wrong with Black Adam. I am happy when my more cynical prognostications turn out to be false, and usually that winds up with me being extremely positive about the movie. Same thing happened with Joker. For it's been a while since we first started the podcast, but back before the first trailer came out, I remember us looking at some of the behind the scenes images and going, what exactly are they doing with this? And the trailer came out and it sold us, and the rest is history. But point being, just because I am cynical by default does not mean I want things to crash and burn. It is, in fact, the exact opposite. It is because I want things to do well that I prepare myself for the worst case scenario, so that if the worst case scenario comes to pass, I don't have to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous misfortune, to quote the bard. And
Moving on.
usually when the dice does come out with a nat 20, so to speak, I'm happy that I was wrong in my cynical prognostications. Unfortunately, though, I'm not going to piss on my own leg and try to convince myself it's raining. And thus I have to call it like I see it. And how I see it is frequently cynical.
Moving on, or
Yep, moving on.
okay. Sources close to production say the film received a mixed reception at earlier test screenings, triggering a cascade of things. Gunn's original cut apparently leaned heavier on humor, something the execs weren't entirely sold on.
I
I mean,
am of I am of two minds on that, because on the
yeah,
one hand, humor can work really well with Superman. On the
um,
other hand, it probably was James Gunn style humor, and his humor tends to be edgy. And the one thing Superman should definitely not be under any circumstances is unwholesome or edgy.
um, well, okay, I can agree on the unwholesome thing. Edgy, I think there's a certain threshold where it becomes a bit much, but I
Point being, you can't write Clark Kent as a likable asshole. You can't turn him into Star Lord or Rocket Raccoon or
well, if
Peacemaker
you
or
were
any of those type of
doing
things.
possibly like I'm not playing devil's advocate here. I'm just I think there is Golden Age, like original, like action comic Superman, a bit like his early drafts, like early.
Right, but
Story.
there's a reason why that fell out of fashion, similar to how Batman stopped using guns about 5 years into his tenure.
I know. I'm just pointing that out. Like the argument can be made there.
Right, but that argument is going to get shot down on the basis of the things that define Superman are his wholesomeness, his innocence,
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying there can be a version of Superman that is a likable asshole.
It would just bomb horribly because that's not what anyone wants from a Superman movie. That's my point. You can't act as though the last 80 years of comic book history and 70 years of cinematic and TV history haven't established that the thing that defines Superman is his purity, his altruism, his naivete, etc.
No, I'm not going to deny that. The naivete thing again. We've had these conversations before. I don't think he's necessarily naive.
I'm not saying that in a dismissive way. I'm saying that in the sense of descriptively, that is one of his defining characteristics, which is why they frequently do the Batman Superman foil thing. Batman's darkness and cynicism and the use of darkness to fight darkness is contrasted by Superman being a character who is just so good that the darkness doesn't find purchase in him, and therefore he frequently gives people the benefit of the doubt when logically he shouldn't, just because someone that good can't think like an evil person, because evil just doesn't compute in his head.
Okay. Where was I? Okay. In response, several comedic beats were cut, trimming down both tone and runtime. Okay. It's weird that it seemed to cut out a lot of runtime.
Well, and this was part of what I was getting at with the James Gunn thing. I worry that he might have been trying to turn Superman into somebody like Peacemaker or Star-Lord or Rocket. And everybody in the test audience probably went, "What in the hell are you doing?"
Okay, moving on. More intriguingly, one of the film's editors was quietly removed mid-process, leading to a slight reworking of the film's structure. This was somewhat of a tweak and signaled a slight shift in how the story was being presented.
Unfortunately, this doesn't surprise me because Warner Brothers seems to be their own worst enemy when it comes to adapting DC comics.
Some key sequences were shuffled and minor scenes were added during recent reshoots.
The shuffling actually worries me more than scenes being added, because scenes being added might have just been to give more context for things, which is something that normally happens during reshoots. Granted, I wish Hollywood would learn to wean itself off the reshoot drug, because half the time with a Hollywood movie, you get the feeling that the entire movie was reshot 3 or 4 different times because of the over-reliance on reshoots. And I wish we could go back to a world where they worked hard on getting the script right the first time so that they didn't have to reshoot third and fourth of the movie at the last possible second. If for no other reason, then it would allow the money spent on the movie to actually make it to the screen. And one of my biggest complaints is that if you spend money on a movie, it should make it to the screen, goddamn you. But yeah, I'm more worried about scenes being shuffled than I am scenes being added. Scenes being added, hopefully, is there to provide additional context, which is something that can be a good thing. Scenes being shuffled around entirely might make the end result extremely disjointed, and that's a bad thing.
Music department wasn't spared either. A second composer was brought in late in the game to reshape the score, suggesting the tone may have been in flux as recently as a few weeks ago. It's all part of what one insider described as a slight course correction. Yeah, that sounds slight.
Yeah, I don't. Again, we're left to fall back on our previous coverage of this, where it really feels like the entire DC branch of Warner Brothers is completely and utterly just flagged by the seat of their pants, hoping that they'll be able to pull something out of their ass at the last possible second. And I wouldn't be this cynical, but here we are at the beginning of June, and the movie comes out in the second week of July. So, the fact that you're so heavily reworking the movie right up until the last second is a bit of a red flag, or at least an orange one, maybe. Maybe not a full-on red flag, but at least a orange one, methinks. This goes back to what I was just saying. It would be nice if I could watch a movie and not be left with the impression that it was being altered until literally the day it came out. Especially given how much is riding on this movie working. Because if Superman, if this version of Superman financially does about the same amount of money that the Henry Cavill Man of Steel did, then this entire DCEU is going to have to either be scrapped entirely or reworked on the fly, just like the Snyderverse was. And we all saw what happened there. Granted, I'm still on team. They should have led with the soft reboot that movies like Wonder Woman and Black Adam were, and not done the full-on reboot to begin with. But I will beat that drum until I'm proven
To be
wrong.
fair, I would say if they were going to do a reboot, just to play somewhat devil's advocate here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Follow the thing you've said before, because I do kind of agree with it, because it is kind of time we do touch upon that. Have it be, instead of focusing on the Justice League, do JSA, like Golden Age, separated from the modern Marvel setting, right?
Yeah. Another thing that kind of goes along with this that I would have added is, instead of ending the DCEU in 2023 and slating this Superman movie for 2025, they should have waited until 2038. And then they can, one, it gives them enough time to distance themselves from the Snyderverse, from the Henry Cavill controversy, from all of the mistakes that was peppered throughout that business. And two, it lets them ride high on the centennial vibe, on the DC has existed for 100 years and we're going back to the Golden Age roots thing.
Shit.
What happened?
My mouse. Hold on. Okay, never mind. I thought my mouse died and I was gonna have to get a battery real quick, but now we're good.
Okay.
Moving on?
Yep.
All right. Altogether, about 25 minutes has been trimmed from earlier versions, giving the final cut a leaner feel. See, that doesn't feel like a good thing.
Yeah, it either means that you wasted 25 minutes of a movie that was fairly short to begin with, and this is you attempting to fix your mistake, or like you had absolutely no confidence in this and hacked 25 minutes off of it. And I don't want to be this much of a dick, but this was also a problem that the suits over at Warner Brothers had when it came to the Snyderverse. Now, I am no fan of the Snyder era of the DCEU, mind you, but let's be real here. The director's cuts and extended editions were usually at least marginally better than the theatrical cuts, because the theatrical cuts usually had about 20 to 30 minutes missing. Didn't make the movies so much better that I'd be willing to go to bat for them, mind you, but frequently those 20 to 30 minutes were necessary context that then got hacked off. And if they're doing the same thing again, then we're gonna wind up in exactly the same position as the DCEU wound up in, of reworking the entire flow of the story and reworking the entire flow of the universe every 5 minutes in the hopes of pleasing people, when all people really want is for them to pick a direction and stick with it, goddamn you. Granted, the Snyder direction was a bad direction, and it was at least good that we got rid of that direction eventually, but for example, the Zack Snyder Justice League was better than the Whedon Justice League. Granted, Wonder Woman, Shazam 1 and 2, and Black Adam were better than either of these two extremes, but that leads us back to the maybe you shouldn't have hit the reboot button in the first place conversation. Because a soft reboot is almost always better than a hard reboot. Especially given that financial returns notwithstanding, a lot of people really liked Wonder Woman 1, Black Adam, and the two Shazam movies. Whereas a lot of people really heavily disliked the Snyderverse, and a lot of people are really just sort of confused and befuddled about everything that's come out of the James Gunn, Peter Safran verse so far. And again, for the record, I hope we're wrong. I hope that all this confusion behind the scenes doesn't make it to the screen, and we're left sitting here going, "Gosh, we were stupid. We should have let James Gunn cook." That being said, I'm not going to lie to myself or the audience and not point out the fact that the behind the scenes stuff does worry me significantly. Moving on.
Although about the adjustments hint at a studio anxious to get it right, especially with this being the first major installment in the rebooted DC universe.
And that sentiment in and of itself is okay. The problem is Warner Brothers' tendency to want to micromanage everything is its own worst enemy and has always been the problem. Whether it be during the Snyder era, the DCEU post-Snyder era, or the new reboot, it really feels like Warner Brothers having absolutely no idea how to do DC properly and wanting to micromanage everything for the sake of it being more marketable, regardless of whether it makes a better story or more compelling characters, is continually the problem. Case in point, a parallel between the Snyderverse era and the current era is in BVS, which was kind of the opening salvo of the Snyderverse. They threw Wonder Woman in. They threw cameos for Aquaman, not Green Lantern, but Aquaman and the Flash and Cyborg in, and they tried to, rather than doing a solid sequel for Man of Steel, force Batman in the mix in the hopes that we could fast track building a universe. And just like that, we have Guy Gardner, even though it should be Hal Jordan, Mr. Terrific, or is it Mr. Miracle? No, it is Mr. Terrific, I think. But point being, BVS had the problem of taking what should have been a Man of Steel sequel and shoving everything else up in it in the hopes of fast-tracking a universe, and the new Superman movie seems to have the same problem of, rather than just making a really, really good Superman movie on Superman movies' terms, they're trying to fast-track the universe by having 7 or 8 different cameos from other franchises all up in it already. And I'm not saying that James Gunn can't do it better than Zack Snyder did, but I am saying it's a parallel between how Warner Brothers seems to want to operate, skipping the phase 1 phase altogether and jumping right to the established universe part that has at least a strong indication of biting them in the ass, just like it did the last time.
Yeah, so I'm gonna. Not that I don't disagree with you, Dolan, but I also think because I'm reworking the revised DCEU like as a project just on the side, and I'm still working within the confines of the movie releases mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even if you don't like have individual movies that set up the characters before the big thing,
yeah,
a crossover movie, I think it's still worth. The issue, obviously, is that you have to put a lot of work in to make it work. That's not what they've done, really.
And like I said, the issue here is it implies a certain mindset among Warner Brothers and the people behind the movies, which is to hell with good storytelling, to hell with treating the characters individually like they matter. Let's just fast track to the already established universe so we can compete with Marvel money. And that attitude is for at least 2, because every time they've tried it with DC, it has bit them in the ass. This will be the 3rd time, essentially, that they're trying to essentially do that same thing. Granted, again, James Gunn is good at characters. He's good at team dynamics. He's good at embracing the wacky, like, Silver Age comic bookiness. So if anyone can manage to show them how to do it properly, it would be James Gunn. But I would also remind everyone that prior to, getting brought in by Warner Brothers, James Gunn explicitly said he did not want to make a Superman movie because he didn't understand the character. Now, mind you, he's probably done a lot of research in the interim to get better familiar with the character. But if I were the sort of person who didn't want to make a Superman project, but was tasked with making a Superman project, one of the things I might do, if I were a person who wanted to avoid Superman at all costs, is shove as many other characters and other IPs in as possible, so I have to spend less time focused on Superman, which I don't really want to do. I'm not saying that's what James Gunn did, but I am saying that it would be consistent with his previously established statements to try something like that. And we already know that James Gunn likes doing ensemble cast and team movies more than he likes doing individual characters. So could this be an attempt to basically turn the JSA into something like the Suicide Squad or the Guardians or the other team like dynamics he's had? Maybe not, but it would be consistent with what he's done before, and it would be consistent with his statements that he made unprompted before he was being paid. So I'm worried. And it would be consistent with Warner Brothers' desire to skip the setup and get right to the, skip to the end, basically, attitude that they've already displayed in BVS, for example. And those two things combined make me excessively worried. Because it feels, at least vaguely, like James Gunn's desire to not really focus much on Superman and Warner Brothers' desire to skip to the end to have an already established universe and to hell with the character establishment might be bringing the worst tendencies out of each other. And that's a bad thing, given how much is riding on this. Moving on.
The last test screening is set to happen this week. Whether these 11th hour changes will pay off remains to be seen, but there is a tad more confidence now that the finished product, which is officially in the can, turns out to be a great film.
I don't know about that. We shall see. I don't trust early reactions because they tend to invite people who are likely to be shills to these pre-premiere test screenings and shit. So I will reserve judgment until I see it with my own eyes, or at least until I can see what critics I actually trust and rely on the opinions of think of it. I will say that if the finished product resembles the plot outline that we covered a couple weeks ago, and that plot outline is more accurate than it isn't, which certain aspects of the trailer we covered do kind of imply, I'm worried.
Moving on.
Moving on.
All right. Okay, let me just present. Yeah, Don sent all the articles because, of course, he does.
Mm-hmm.
It's from Bloomberg.
My detector goes ding when there's stupidity to be unmasked. Brainstormer is the one who can be relied upon to find the positive things, usually.
All right. Yeah, so this is from Bloomberg.com. Video game companies have an AI problem. Players don't want it. This is written by Jason Schreier, published May 23rd, 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Subheader is posters like EA and Take-Two are warning shareholders about the potential reputational risk of AI.
Well, this is kind of a microcosm of the problem with people fear-mongering about AI to begin with, in the sense that I think in many ways AI is a bubble. Like, a bunch of corporations are funneling a whole bunch of money into AI in the hopes that it can be this kind of magic bullet panacea thing. But all AI really does is it takes the kind of thing that you'd find in a search engine and combines it with the digital assistant you would get on a phone, like a Siri, a Cortana, and Alexa, and so on. And yeah, there's some additional functionality there, but is that additional functionality worth putting as much money as corporations are currently putting into it? Given that it basically takes some of those functions like spell check, like search engines, like digital assistants, and combines them. But so far, there's not much you can do with an AI that you can't do with some version of all the three things I just listed. And when corporations realize that it's more financial trouble than it's worth to make AIs, and that there's not actually as much panacea potential with AI as there is with other things, then the bubble's gonna pop, and without the dozens upon dozens of millions of servers used to maintain the large language models, what use it? I'm not saying AI will not evolve eventually into a technology that can do some of the things that corporations seem to think it's capable of doing. But much like Bitcoin, NFTs, and 3D printers, I think this is very much still kind of in the beta test phase. And as with a lot of technology, very much in the beta test phase that corporations are funneling a bunch of money in the hopes that it'll be profitable later. At least one bubble has to pop before the next version of this technology can be maintained. especially given how much the consumer base is actually very skeptical of using it in the first place. Moving on.
All right. Hi, everyone. Today we're talking about the risk for video game companies looking to use generative AI in their products. But first, hold on. To be fair, I think the issue. Oh, to be fair, that people have to create video games. The companies that would be using this, I feel like, are the companies that have not put a lot of effort into making the video games.
Well, that's the thing. AI.
Hold on. Can I?
Sorry. Go ahead.
And as has been proven, and has become running jokes at this point, those same companies that have not put, well, okay, I don't want to say have not put a lot of effort in, but have basically prioritized greed over making something that has heart and soul put into it, that would get you money, right? Basically, think about the profit first instead of making the thing first and then get the profit.
In other words, instead of... Go ahead.
Sorry, I just like one last thing. And the AI in this way, which, to be fair, I do think they use AI when they're like in the more rudimentary sense to help them correct mistakes when they're digitally making something, right? But in the way I think they're using the generative AI here, obviously, is to cut costs possibly on like designers and stuff like that, which never truly works well, I think. And again, more than likely would not be in a game that would catch many people's interest and would basically just be a failure at launch.
Well, here's the other thing. AI is a digital tool. Like, irrespective of all the other implications of AI, that is what it is. It is a digital tool in the same way that CGI, for example, was a digital tool about 30 years ago. The problem with digital tools and technological tools like AI, and people have understood this about computers basically since the 90s, there's an old adage about computers and computerized technology that still holds true regardless of how advanced it gets, which is crap in, crap out. And the people currently working for especially AAA video game companies prioritize how can we manipulate the audience into buying our shit without giving them a good game or without convincing them to buy something on its own merits over let's just make something good enough that it will convince people to buy shit, which I think is part of what Brainstorm was getting at earlier.
Yeah.
Rather than focus your resources on giving someone something they want to buy organically on its own merits, instead there's this kind of marketing, advertising, and PR attitude of we don't need to make something worthwhile and good on its own merits. We just need to gaslight people and manipulate them and convince them and market them into buying things regardless of whether they're good or not. And that kind of attitude will not yield good results with AI because, again, the aforementioned crap in, crap out. And seeing as most of the people working for AAA video game companies in today's day and age are only capable of producing crap, then the AI has nothing but crap to work with. And if the AI has nothing but crap to work with, then the end result is going to be crappy. And you add to that the fact that in many cases, the kind of mediocre, just, basic competency of the AI is actually better than the quote unquote creative direction of the AAA gaming industry, to the point that people would prefer risking the AI to dealing with the AAA creative, and the fact that people don't trust and don't like AI to begin with because well, let's be honest, we've all grown up on things like Matrix and Terminator for so many decades now that it's going to take a lot to get people to convince people to use AI as anything other than a slightly upgraded alternative to a digital assistant like Alexa or Siri, mixed with a little bit of slightly upgraded replacement for Google. Like those are the main things AI is used for. That and like romance or like fictional role playing shit. And for the most part, a slightly upgraded version of Google or a slightly upgraded version of Alexa mixed with an interesting romantic simulating tool is not a broad enough category of functionality to justify the expenditures that goes into making the AI work in the first place. And once the corporations realize that AI is basically a money pit with very limited functionality and isn't actually going to function as this, you know, technological revolution panacea thing, they're going to withdraw the resources. And once they withdraw those resources, that coupled with people's inherent like AI skepticism, again, thank you Terminator and the Matrix, is probably going to make, at the very least, there's probably going to be 20 to 25-year delays between AI as it exists right now in its overloaded bubble form and AI 25 years from now where it might actually start doing the things that people now are thinking it might be capable of doing eventually.
I mean, no, you're right. Shall we move on?
Yep, moving on.
All right, reputational risk. This week, Take-Two filed its annual 10-K to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. There are a few interesting tidbits. For example, the company now employs 12,928 staff members, a jump from last year's 12,371, and it has scrubbed references to diversity. But one section in particular stood out to me. As part of the 10-K form, companies are required to list risk factors for potential investors to peruse. Most of the Take-Two's disclosed risks are standard, like our industry is highly competitive, but there's also a relatively new entry about artificial intelligence, which was first added in 2024 but expanded this year. The development and use of artificial intelligence AI into our products may present operational and reputational risk. Reputational, huh? Take-Two elaborates. Growth of AI technologies in our industry has influenced game producers game production, for developers and gaming experience for players. The use of this new and emerging technology, which is in its early stages of widespread commercial use, presents social and ethical issues that may result in legal and reputational harm and liability.
Which is twofold. One, once people realize the AI can actually do it better than the AAA gaming industry for the most part, that's going to result in a lot of people baying for the blood of the AAA gaming industry. Because if a glorified Siri mixed with Google mixed with spell check can outdo you, it's just possible that you might be shit to begin with. And then the second half, which is I think what the title is getting at, thanks to movies like Terminator and The Matrix, people are very AI skeptical to begin with. And add to that the fact that AI, at least as it currently exists, is far more expensive than it would need to be profitable, and far less applicable than it would need to be for a lot of these like more sci-fi predictions to come to pass. And once the corporations realize they're essentially throwing money into a hole, and that hole isn't yielding money back out, at least not to any meaningful degree, this entire industry is at least going to go on a hiatus for 20 years until we can get to the point. Again, it's very much similar to other sort of niche technologies right now, like NFTs, Bitcoin, and 3D printers, which
I'm
is
not sure about the 3D printers, mind you, because those things have been around for about a decade or so and are relatively used for the most part.
right. But they're getting there. But same thing is true of Bitcoin, and same thing is true of NFTs. Like as a concept, as an amusement, these things have um some limited usefulness. But much as with these other things I just mentioned, the corporations and the people willing to invest in these technologies don't want something with minor gimmicks that can vaguely improve on small details. They want something that's going to revolutionize the entire system. And at least in their current forms, these technologies cannot do that. Again, in 20 years' time or 25 years' time, maybe we will get the like next gen or the generation after next 3D printer that can operate more like a Tony Stark fabricator, or we'll be able to get the form of Bitcoin that actually can replace like credit cards, or we might be able to get the NFT that can act as some kind of replacement for currency, but not in its current form. And same thing with AI. Maybe in the next generation or so, we might get a AI that can operate more like Samantha from Her, or the hologram girlfriends from Blade Runner 2049, but not in its current form and not in any foreseeable version of its current form, because frankly, it's too expensive to run AI as they exist right now, let alone the like massive leaps forward in technology that it's going to take to actually make a Samantha from Her, or I don't remember the AI girlfriend's name in Blade Runner 2049. Like, it's too expensive to run as is, let alone what it needs to be to actually be profitable or functional.
Also,
Moving on.
want to point this out: Blade Runner, the director's cut, is the best version of like the original Blade Runner movie. Because
Okay,
it's like
I was gonna say, I hope you're not defending Denis Villeneuve's sequel.
I haven't watched it. I'll be honest. I wanted to watch it, but I had the choice between The Foreigner and Blade Runner 2049 when they were coming out, and I chose The Foreigner.
You made the right choice.
I mean,
Granted, I will acknowledge that I am a hater when it comes to Denis Villeneuve, much as I am a hater of Christopher Nolan, who Denis Villeneuve shamelessly rips off most of the time. But I think you made the right choice, my friend.
Oh, hey, Rachel. Hey, you're cool, man. Uh, and honestly, I feel that I've had that before. Like when I first started working last year, it was so hard to like keep it. I mean, I had to, because I have first shift. I have a first shift
Yeet.
job. Motherfucker,
Hmm.
you never have to work, okay? So you don't have to wake up that early. Catch lessons, motherfucker.
This is true, but that's why I am yeeking in empathy, because I
I feel it's hollow because you don't know the struggle.
you're right. I suppose I will have to content myself with my struggle to be freaking alive most of the time. But like
Are you always gonna are you gonna like always defer to that when I call you out?
I'm just saying you don't know the struggle implies that you think I don't have struggles that are equivalent to that in any way, and yeah, no, you can sort off.
I mean, technically you don't because I'm not in life-threatening danger every day because of how I was born. So I wouldn't know your struggle.
My point is, please do not act like I don't have struggles that
I'm not.
are
That was not the point, Dalton. Is that you? This I was referring to the specific struggle of me having to work for a living.
And instead, I have to serve essentially at the government's pleasure because goddamn disability bureaucracy is what is going to maintain whether or not I can ever leave home and have a life of my own on my own terms.
Uh, uh, fucking governments, man. Anyway,
Yep, bunch of cuts from top to bottom.
right.
Yeah, there's no argument there.
Hope you feel well, General. And hey, if you gotta leave to go to bed, that's cool, man. It's all this is recorded, so it's always here whenever you want to watch it. So
Yeah.
not gonna,
Which does bear remarking upon, because lest you forget, every single episode we've ever done is still recorded. We do not delete them after streaming them. So if you feel like you want more of our content for whatever reason, there is a backlog that's about
okay.
6 years long here.
Okay, he's catching up the last hour. And I do agree with Dragon Turtle. You do lump all action movies together.
Again, it's just my acknowledgement that I don't particularly like the genre unless there's something added on top of it. Like, yeah, to get me specifically into an action movie, you have to add some special sauce to the thing.
I don't agree with your assumption that Mission Impossible is does not have that sauce. Again, that's your preference. I'm not gonna knock you for it. I disagree with it, but I'm not gonna like. Honestly, I feel it's just tiring. I don't think I'm gonna convince you, so I'm just not really.
Mm-hmm.
You are a stubborn motherfucker.
I am aware. This is known Khaleesi, although in my defense, I have never denied it to either of you. My first move whenever I meet someone who might potentially be a friend is to be straight up with the fact that I am an asshole. Like, I am straight up dog burying this bitch. Masters, forget not that I am an ass, though it be not written down, yet forget not that I am an ass.
No, I know you're an ass. I think you're a bit hard-headed sometimes and not willing to look at another perspective as easily.
Just because there are far too many idiotic cunts in the world, and if I gave as much benefit of the doubt as I give to you and Dragon Turtle to all the morons in the world, I think I would have gone insane by now.
Don, I'm not referring to that. I am specifically referring to Dragon Turtle and I. Yeah, that was what I was specifically referencing. Also, I'm not gonna lie. Every time I turn on my Amazon Fire Stick, I have seen the Dresden File TV show pop up, and I've been curious to watch it.
For the love of God, do not. It is an abomination upon the earth and should be scorched from human memory entirely. It is terrible.
Well, okay, I would be watching it with. Okay, I'm genuinely curious though if it's as bad as I could agree that it could be more than likely bad as a adaptation of the Dresden Files, but I am curious if it could stand on its own merit as its own thing.
I will give you an example of the sheer dumbfounding early 2000s stupidity that is the Dresden Files show. In the books, Harry Dresden, like a wizard would, carries a magical staff because he is a wizard. In the TV show, he carries around a hockey stick not a magical staff disguised as a hockey stick, which would at least be minorly clever. He uses a hockey stick as a staff for no other reason than the executives at early 2000s era Sci-Fi Channel thought it made more sense for a wizard to carry around a random hockey stick, which has no magical utility whatever, and use it as a staff anyway, because it makes more sense to have a person randomly carrying a hockey stick everywhere than it does to carry a staff everywhere, for some reason.
Well, I would say it would make sense if he was in Canada rather than is he set in Chicago? Actually, I'm genuinely curious.
I think it's still supposed to be set in Chicago. I have absolutely no idea though, because they don't. This is another one of those things that will never cease to flummox me. Dresden Files, the book series, uses Chicago as the setting and actually incorporates the city of Chicago into the setting. In the Dresden Files, yeah, in the Dresden Files TV, like in the books, Chicago itself is a character in the same way that like Metropolis or Gotham are characters in their respective franchises. In the show, it is basically a generic city. There is no way of differentiating the show's version of Chicago from New York or LA or anywhere the fuck else.
Okay. Anyway, shall we continue?
Yep, moving on.
And then emphasis in bold is mine. Any integration of any AI technology into our products or services may result in new or enhanced governmental or regulatory scrutiny, litigation, confidentiality, or security risk. Ethical concerns, negative user perceptions as to automation and AI, or other complications that could adversely affect their business reputation or financial results. Okay.
In this one instance, corporations being how corporations are actually makes sense. Yes, they wouldn't want to damage their bottom line. Granted, they should remember that more often and not alienate their user bases in the first place, but baby steps, I suppose. Moving along.
All right. Here's Electronic Arts Incorporated with a similar discourse. We are integrating artificial intelligence tools and technologies into our business and development processes. The use of artificial intelligence might present social and ethical issues that, if not managed appropriately, may result in legal and reputational harm, cause consumers to lose confidence in our business and brands, and negatively impact our financial and operating results.
Again, you would think they would remember their bottom line more often when they're trying to actively alienate their audience base. But at the very least, in this particular moment, they are not being morons. So, fair enough.
Take-Two and EA are acknowledging a problem that not enough companies have confronted. Players kind of hate generative AI. As every major video game firm rushes to concoct a robust plan for implementing artificial intelligence in their business, they need to consider the potential backlash. When video game enthusiasts react harshly to a product or initiative, it can change the entire narrative, sometimes tanking a game or at least helping prevent it from taking off.
Okay, here is where I disagree with them slightly, which is, yes, people are extremely skeptical of AI and extremely hesitant to use it or use anything that uses it because of the Terminator effect. But in many contexts, people may be skeptical of the AI a la Terminator, but they prefer the AI over, for example, the games journalist or the AAA gaming creative. In other words, yes, people do hate and are skeptical of AI, but if it means getting rid of the games journalist or the AAA creative, people will and do choose the AI over you guys all the live long time. I don't think you guys realize just how deeply hated y'all are in the fucking first place. I can't say no amount of AI skepticism can trump the hatred of the games journal and the AAA creative. But it's gonna take a lot of fear mongering about AI to get people anywhere close to the kind of skepticism they have against the games journal or the AAA creative. Because at the very least, when the AI accidentally fails and accidentally does something horrible or cringy, it does so because that's what it was told to do, as opposed to the games journalist or the AAA creative who do things out of ideological moralism and active spite and contempt for their audience base and or the IPs they are being stewards of. And incompetence and occasionally heavy-handed pandering is far more preferable to most people over active spite and ideological possession. Because as much as they may hate and fear the AI, they hate and despise y'all more because you did it to yourselves. In many ways. Moving on.
Okay. We've seen the backlash AI take varied form over the forms this year. A recent job listing for a PlayStation Studio seeking an artist with experience using AI tools was roundly mocked. A leaked video of an AI prototype of Horizon Zero Dawn protagonist was so silly and triggered so much criticism that Alloy's real voice actor Ashley Birch made her own video, denouncing it. An AI recreation of Darth Vader in Fortnite using the voice of the deceased James Earl Jones led to a voice actor rebellion and complaint with the National Labor Relations Board.
Okay, but that is a bad example. Or at least those examples you provided are bad examples. Because what your title suggests is that the audience of the corporation is rejecting the AI. What your examples described was other professionals in the industry rejecting the AI. And I can't believe how many times I've had to say this over the years. But dear voice actors, dear writers, dear authors, etc., you are not the audience of the things you are acting in. You need to understand that your concerns are not the audience's concerns. It's kind of like when voice actress for Azula, Ray Delisle, saw that one Scooby-Doo AI thing, and she was decrying it, and she wondered why people would even engage with it, not realizing that a pompous voice actor's concerns are not the same as the audience's concerns. The audience is generally concerned about AI because they're worried of the Terminator problem. They're worried that the AI will, or alternatively, the South Park problem of people are worried about the AI taking our jobs. But you see how those two things, the Terminator consideration and the taking our jobs consideration, are not the same as a pompous voice actor egotistically grandstanding because, oh, you created an AI that mimicked my voice, how dare you? Those aren't the same thing. Yes, I guess they might superficially resemble each other because of the Turkin or Jubes element, but the audience who are concerned about Turkin or Jubes are concerned about it for the reason of, or rather the same rationale they're worried about automation eventually making their jobs obsolete. they're not worried because, oh, the poor put upon victimized voice actor. Especially not when said poor put upon victimized voice actor TM is an arrogant prick who doesn't understand why people would be amused by something able to mimic their voice. Now, don't get me wrong. If the voice actors are not insufferable cunts, which is a very big, if the voice actors are not insufferable cunts, people are more than willing to side with the voice actor. But once the voice actor has the same pompous, grandstanding attitude as everyone else in fucking Hollywood, you make yourself less likable than the AI. And when you make yourself less likable than the AI, people's response to you getting your job replaced is, good, you don't appreciate your job anyway, so we will gladly replace you. To all of the pompous Hollywood twats, whether they be voice actors or whether they be actors, who want to be preferable to the AI, have you considered not being a bunch of dicks? It would be very, very helpful for your case if you weren't a bunch of pompous pseudo-aristocrats all the fucking time. And if you maintain this pompous pseudo-aristocracy of yours, you're just going to make people go, I will gladly replace you with AI just to piss you off because you are undeserving twats. Moving on.
Alright. A large part of this backlash comes from the potential loss of jobs, plagiarism concerns, and the heavy environmental costs. But players also seem uninterested in what generative AI has to offer. The idea of, say, a computer-controlled character who can react to anything you say to them has been possible for decades. See the 1960s computer program Eliza? Yeah, Eliza, sorry. But has never turned into more than a novelty. AI-generated art is consistently sloppy and unpleasant, generally associated less with aesthetic merit and more with fake Facebook movie posters that convince your parents a sequel to Breaking Bad is coming this year.
That's only true to an extent. Because this is the thing. The AI is very good at doing mid, at doing middle of the road, at doing basic competency, at doing mediocre. The problem is that many of the industries the AI is gunning for, are significantly worse than mid most of the time now. This is the aforementioned Hollywood arrogance problem. If you genuinely have the talent to be better than mid, to be better than mediocre, you have nothing to fear from the AI, at least not at this point. But there are so many people who not only are less than mid or less than mediocre, but who will deliberately be less than mid or deliberately be less than mediocre for ideological reasons of herder beauty standards are toxic, herder meritocracy doesn't exist, and etc. And those people are the people who the AI is at this moment capable of and preferable to replacing. I.e., the people with actual talent who know what the fuck they're doing will have nothing to fear from AI in the foreseeable future. The people who deliberately flout things like aesthetics, beauty standards, and merit for ideological and moral reasons because it's immoral to give the audience what they want, those are the people who have something to fear from the AI because they choose deliberately to not even rise to the level of mid and do so deliberately. And frankly, I think I can speak for most fans when I say, most geeks, most nerds, most audience members when I say, if you deliberately choose to do the wrong thing on purpose, then I applaud the AI replacing your ass. Because your ideologically warped bullshit is wrong and always has been, and I'm sick of watching it destroy everything I love from the inside out. Thanks. Moving on.
Right. Okay. Sorry, I was doing something real quick. When people play video games, they want experiences that feel authored by humans. In narrative-focused games like The Last of Us, players are hoping for a story that will move them in a way that can only be crafted by creatives who understand the human condition. In mechanic-focused games like Elden Ring, players want battles and levels that were designed by real people, because playing them is almost like engaging in conversation with the developers.
I don't think that is anything like as important as you think it is. I think that's more art school woo. I think the main thing people are after in terms of video games, just like the main thing people are after in pretty much every form of entertainment, is they want to have fun. They want to be engaged. They want to enjoy themselves. And if the authors of said game can manage that, so much the better. But if, for example, the creatives who work for these companies believe that meritocracy, fun, engagement, or fan service are morally forbidden and should be shunned and subverted at every turn, then again, we wind up in the case of, yes, people are skeptical of AI, but at least the AI isn't doing it for moral reasons. Whereas many of the people who work for these companies will deliberately fuck with something that should have been entertaining, should have been fun, should have been interesting, should have been enjoyable to play or enjoyable to act or enjoyable to see, etc., and deliberately choose to fuck with it for ideological and moral reasons. And those people, frankly, deserve to be replaced with the AI. They deliberately make themselves less preferable than the AI, and then they wonder why people choose the AI over them. That being said, there will always be a certain level of skepticism against the AI because we've grown up for the last 20 or 30 years on the Terminator syndrome. Moving on.
Right. Even trivial elements of a game like background art can have a tinge of ickiness when created by AI, marring an otherwise interesting game. Players want to immerse themselves in worlds that they know were fashioned by human beings, not robots. Today's
I
AI hold on. Today's AI buzz is reminiscent of previous fads like the ill-conceived NFT craze when game companies attempt to jam unpopular technology down players' throats, only to find that they weren't opening their mouths. Initiatives from companies like Ubisoft Entertainment SA were widely derided and ultimately went nowhere. Seeing the word blockchain in a video game pitch is a good sign it will fail.
here's the problem with your analysis. Again, I'll try to sum it up. You seem to be putting an awful lot of emphasis on the intentions or the artistic input of the author. And I'm sorry, I will say this to every creative currently in a mass market industry, your input is not nearly as important as you think it is. No one wants you for you. They want you for your ability to deliver the goods. And if you can't deliver the goods, or especially lately, the problem of morally and philosophically deliberately refusing to deliver the goods, no amount of glazing of your artistic ego is going to sell people. This is the problem with art for most of like the latter 20th century and into the 21st century. Artists have got it into their heads for some fucking reason, thank you Frankfurt School, that the purpose of art is to extol their ego, is to extol the greatness of the author. And no, that you have that not just wrong but directly inverted. You become a good author by producing good works. No amount of your greatness as a person will ever translate into the piece unless you put your ego aside and abide by some level of artistic storytelling or aesthetic standards. I.e., you don't become a good author because the greatness of your personality or your ego is so grand. that it shines through your art. You become a good author by doing your job well. And the sooner we can get that through most authors' heads, the better off art in general will be. It's not about you, it's about the art. An artist's job is by and large to serve their art. Their art's job is not to serve them. And if you make your art about serving yourself and your own ego instead of you serving your art, you will always crash and burn and frankly be preferred over to the AI. Seriously. If you make it too much about your own personal narcissism, people will start preferring the AI to you, because at the very least, when the AI does something pandering and mediocre, that's because it was programmed to do it, not because it has a moral objection to the idea of beauty standards or meritocracy. Unless they program one in, which at that point, people will hate both the creative and the AI for being ideologically possessed cunts. Moving on.
All right. Unlike NFTs, which had no purpose beyond speculative investing, generative AI appears to have longevity. Many people have found the tools to be genuinely useful for productivity, so long as they're used the right way. And many businesses appear more than willing to replace the robotic sounding website copy with robot written website copy. Sure, Gen AI has messed up Google search results, propagated misinformation, and filled every app with those infuriating prompts, but it'd be more inaccurate to describe it as completely meritless. Like any powerful tool, it can be used in both positive and negative ways.
And here's I agree with that last part, but here's the thing. I foresee a world where AI becomes part of the author or the artist tool rather than some kind of universal replacement for it. Much like CGI before it, everyone and their dog back in the 90s and 80s believed that if we let CGI become a thing, it was just going to suck the soul out of everything it touched. What we eventually learned in T2, in Jurassic Park, in various other franchises and so on, is that we were thinking about it wrong. Instead of thinking CGI is anathema to art, we should have realized from the get-go that it was going to be a tool in the artist's toolbox. And I think AI is going to wind up being the same way. Just like you have artists who specialize in rendering CGI in today's day and age, something that was completely unthinkable 30 years ago. Eventually, you're going to have departments in mass market corporate IP who specialize in getting the best results out of the AI, either by using it as a tool in post-production, kind of like a spell check editor, or as a tool in concept art to begin with. Frankly, I see it having both a pre-production element and a post-production element, where you'll get skilled users of AI, skilled AI artists, using AI to come up with concept art, and then they'll make the movie, and then they will fast-track post-production using AI to touch up what they managed to do during standard production. That's what I foresee being the future and legacy of AI. Much like with CGI before it, it's going to become a tool in the artist toolbox, and it's going to be something that certain artists will specialize in and use to the benefit of production rather than a replacement for artists. The only artists who will suffer as a result of this will be people who can be easily replaced, which in this instance, much as with CGI before them, are people who weren't good at their jobs to begin with, or people who couldn't make themselves useful to the new paradigm quickly enough. And as much as I can be kind of a soulless Darwinian about these things, if you don't have the skill necessary to make use of the tools that the world begins to offer you, maybe you deserve it at least a little bit. Harsh, but them's the rules. Moving on.
All right. One of the most negative and one that appears to repel and disgust players is when AI is used to replace or automate design, concept art, and other human parts of the artistic process. It's no wonder Take-Two and EA consider the use of AI to be a potential reputational risk. If fans discover the background art in new Borderlands or Grand Theft Auto was generated by AI, the backlash would be loud and immense, especially if you could trace the art back to the creator from which the AI tools drew. And suddenly one of those companies was face to face with a plagiarism scandal. I mean, to be fair, they've done that. Companies like that have done that before, so.
They have. But much like CGI before it, AI is at its worst when it's bad. Like this is the difference between movies like The Matrix or T2 or Hell, as much as I hate them, even things like Inception and Avatar. Good CGI is an asset to a production, and bad CGI, like the kind that you see in a lot of Marvel movies, it must be said, or like the kind you see in the Minecraft movie, for example, are detriments. But that's not because people have an antipathy towards CGI. It's because people have an antipathy to shit CGI. People always seem to overlook the quality issue. That's why in the early 2000s you did see a lot of productions that were sunk by shit use of CGI. But that doesn't change the fact that movies like The Matrix are classics even to this day, and their CGI holds up even by today's standards. Much in the same way, people notice AI when it is badly used. We go back again to that thing I was saying earlier about AI, like any other digital tool, is a crap in, crap out, good in, good out system. What we need to remind ourselves, just like we did with CGI, is I don't care how advanced or new or shiny the tool is, if you don't use it well, the result will be shit. But if you do use it well, it will be an asset to the production just like every other tool. Them's the rules. What we need is to streamline the system such that we can figure out who is good at getting good results from AI. Just like we streamlined the system and figured out who is good at getting good results with CGI. And those people will keep their jobs and will, in fact, probably very well paid for being able to get good results with AI, just like the CGI artists were. And the people who can only use AI, like CGI, to produce crap will lose their jobs because they can only produce crap with it. Such is, unfortunately, the way the world works. Moving on.
Video game companies are famous for trying to avoid or mitigate risk at all costs. They'll bring in focus tests to ensure that games are received well, follow a checklist of features and chase trends that seem too big to fail. So why take the risk of using generative AI in a game with growth slowing and development budget swelling? You'd think the stakes would be too high.
Well, you would think a lot of the decisions companies make would be too risky, given how much is at stake in today's day and age. But that doesn't stop, especially the AAA video game companies, from alienating their audience on principle most of the time. Maybe we should Maybe we should address that before we address anything that might be symptomatic of it. No matter what tools you do or do not use, video game companies, or Hollywood in general, no matter what tools you do or do not use, it will all be moot unless you can get over this attitude of we hate our audience, we shun our audience, fan service is immoral, meritocracy doesn't exist, and etc. Because nothing that comes from that mindset will ever succeed by anything other than sheer dumb luck, frankly. So we need to address that mindset first, AI or no freaking AI. Moving on.
All right. Give me 1 sec. I'm just. Be fair, I did do this. I read the Dark Tower books, well, the first one, before I watched the movie. I was deeply saddened by that.
Yeah, this is why I think we should at least make him read or listen to the first book before we let him watch the unspeakable travesty that is the 2004 series.
Oh.
After he has at least got a taste of the good life, then he can choose to rape his own mind with the travesty that is the TV show.
Jesus, dude.
I really hate the TV. Like, okay, this is how bad the TV show was. I actually did watch the TV show before I knew the books were a thing, and the TV show was so bad that it took me like 15 years before I was willing to give the books a chance. And the person who convinced me to give the books a chance won me over by saying that it's basically nothing like the TV show. So that should tell you just how unspeakably awful the TV show is. So you should get a taste of the book first, and then actually, you know what? No, what you should do is you should read the first book, and then you should watch the episode that is an attempt to adapt the first book, because there is an episode that tries to be Stormfront, and my God, it's terrible. Once you know what Stormfront should be, then you can watch the episode that most closely compares to it, and then you will see that I am correct, because that thing is unspeakable.
All right. Okay. So. All right. So this is from GamesRadar.com. Dragon Age Maestro says EA always spoke about a hypothetical nerd cave full of diehard RPG fans who would always show up so you didn't have to try and appeal to them. It's written by Ali Jones, and not entirely sure where it's published because the archive version says published 5 hours ago. But
okay, so here's the thing about this. This is literally the exact opposite of the attitude you should be taking. Instead of thinking to yourself, we have a loyal, devoted audience, so we should ignore them entirely and do anything to get anyone else on board we can, you should think to yourself, we have a loyal, devoted audience, and therefore our first responsibility should be to please them as much as we possibly can, because that actually has the potential to work. Because here's the thing. This also contains in it the gross misapprehension of the idea that people who like things don't like things or aren't convinced to like things for reasons, which is false. People who grow to like a thing grow to like it for a reason. And usually the way you expand an audience is by doubling and tripling down onto whatever made the thing popular in the first place, whatever good qualities led to the fan base growing in the first place. And then when the average normie sees the good qualities that the hardcore fans were drawn to laid bare before them, that is usually what convinces that normie to become a less casual fan. The same thing happened with the MCU. When the MCU was good, its first port of call was let's please the fans really, really well and hope that whatever good qualities drew the fans to it in the first place will translate well to the more general audience. The MCU now frequently makes the opposite case, where, well, obviously the hardcore fans are going to show up no matter what we do, so let's hyperfixate on getting a whole bunch of casuals on board. And what that generally turns to is so much of the good qualities that got people on board in the first place are gone, and it alienates both the hardcore fan and the would-be casual fan, because wouldn't you go ahead and know it, the reason why people get invested in things is because of those things' qualities in the first place. If you get rid of the qualities that drew people to it in the first place, you get rid of, well, quality in general eventually. Moving on.
All right. Subheader, maybe they were right, but they shouldn't have said it. Okay, so I do want to point this out. I've never really gotten into Dragon Age. I was more of like a Mass Effect guy. Granted, the only one I ever, because it was a little before my time. Because you guys gotta remember, I was born '99.
Mm-hmm.
I played Mass Effect Andromeda.
Mm.
And Don, because I don't think you are aware of that, it is considered the worst one. It's very bad.
I've heard of it, and you're right. It doesn't have a good reputation.
Yeah.
I don't
I
really
see.
have an opinion one way or the other, but I've heard of its negative reputation.
It's weird. Like, honestly, I would always assume you're more of an RPG guy than the platforming kind of dude, but
Well, most of my fandom for gaming is kind of a retro historical thing. I like Mario. Obviously I love Castlevania, and my God, did Netflix do it right? And so
so
on.
you're old.
Yes, I am as ever the old soul PM.
No, just old.
You young cunt, Hugh.
Anyway, moving on, or did you have anything else?
No, go ahead. Moving on.
Okay. Dragon Age veteran says EA like to refer to a cave where RPG fans who could be trusted about anything the genre threw at them would dwell. Speaking of Games Radar Plus, BioWare veteran David Gator, I think, explained that before he left BioWare, his taste had become somewhat old-fashioned in EA's eyes. I was very vocal on the Dragon Age team, he says. I was always trying to push it to our traditional mechanics, and that wasn't very welcome in the EA sphere. He says that EA considered those mechanics the kind that shaped games like Dragon Age Origins to be slow and cumbersome rather than actiony and slick. Rather than the actiony and slick presentation that the studio was being pushed toward. And that hasn't worked out for EA much, has it?
Yeah, no, again, this is the thing I was talking about with the title. Rather than thinking to themselves, well, we have a hardcore fan base that we can exploit no matter what, so let's ignore them entirely and get as many casuals as we can in here, they should have said to themselves, we have a hardcore audience that really, really cares about us and our IP. We should go out of our way to make sure they're still happy. One of these is likely to alienate the hardcore fan base and a bunch of normies along with it. And one of these is likely to actually expand the number of hardcore fans by turning people who would otherwise be neutral to a thing into hardcore invested story. This is why, for example, people will still swear up and down that the DC animated universe is one of the best translation of the comics in the history of television in general, or in the history of media in general.
Although
While simultaneously, people still to this day will bitch about how Man of Steel get pretty much everything it's possible to get wrong about the character of Superman, wrong about the character of Superman. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I have recently seen that some people have started to say that, and I can kind of see it, that the Wonder Woman of DCAU is not the most well adapted of the DCAU characters.
I think what would have been beneficial there is if she had had her own animated series.
Yeah, honestly, dude, I think we're all in like the ballpark that Wonder Woman at some, like, the only thing she's really gotten, obviously, besides the movies and that one anime movie and the TV show in the 70s, like, why the fuck is she not getting her own? Like, she's part of the trinity of DC characters. Like,
well, and that's why so many of the good qualities that were already established in Batman the Animated Series and Superman the Animated Series were able to carry over with their Superman and their Batman, because all the work to already establish their worlds and their places in them had already been done in their respective series. Now, mind you, that's not really an excuse either, because quite a lot of the one-off characters from Justice League Unlimited were tremendously well served, despite not having their own series. But given that Wonder Woman is a member of the Trinity, and given that her corner of things would have been a nice introduction to kind of the more mystical side of the DC universe prior to Justice League, it is kind of a nonsense that she didn't get her own series. Especially because the voice actor for Wonder Woman in Justice League is fucking perfect. Like, everything about what we got of her works excellently. It's just we didn't get enough of her, and they didn't have another whole show's worth of content to base her character on.
right. To be fair, I'm gonna be fully honest. Just because I was aware of this, and I've seen people, like, whenever they were pitching like a '90s Justice League, Lucy Lawless, like, being a voice for Wonder Woman, or at the very least now could be maybe Hippolyta.
Given that.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
And for those who don't know, Lucy Lawless was Xena, warrior princess from the 90s. It was a spinoff show of Hercules.
Hercules: The Legendary Journeys.
Thank you. And she actually did voice Wonder Woman in DC's new DC animated movie, Justice League: New Frontier,
which is good casting, for the record.
Yeah. I wouldn't, like, if not, like, honestly, I could say more than likely I would see her more as a Hippolyta now if there was an animated series of Wonder Woman announced, rather than Diana, like, because
I think either could work. It depends on how quote unquote modern you want Wonder Woman to be. Because Lucy Lawless can definitely do the old fashioned these and thous and so ons because of things like Xena, but also a role that I think emphasizes this, or actually no, I can think of two roles that really emphasize this well. One, when she played Ruby in Ash versus Evil Dead, she very much had that old school like genteel or old school like refined aspect to her, the sort of ancient immortal thing. But also in Salem seasons 2 through 3, when she played the Countess, who was pretty much confirmed to be Lilith, even though they never call her that, which annoys me. But yeah, when she was playing Lilith in Salem seasons 2 and 3, she also kind of had that old school, refined, like immortal sensibility to her. So I could see her going either way, depending on how old fashioned you wanted Diana to be. If you want Diana to be a more modern character, kind of like she was written in Justice League, then no. But if you want her to kind of keep her like immortal affectations, then Lucy Lawless would be good.
I know, but I think, okay, just going with how things are, I would say similarly it would be close, like if this was an animated series, similarly it would be close to like My Adventures with Superman.
If they did it now.
Yeah.
Which, how far the mighty have fallen as far as DC animated content is concerned.
I'm going to be fully honest. I've recently looked into it. I know I remember when we were watching the trailers and stuff for it, it didn't look too good. And don't get me wrong, there are still some issues with it, but it's actually gotten relatively good.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that compared to Superman the animated series,
I think it's just like the tiny issues that kind of build up a bit much.
Yeah, the death by 1,000 paper cuts thing.
Yeah.
Although that comparing anything to the DC animated universe is going to wind up going bad, because again, the DC animated universe is one of the greatest adaptations of comic books, period, and one of the greatest animated series to ever be produced by the Western world. And I really wish we could go back to the like serious action cartoon of the 90s and early 2000s, because my fucking god, do I miss the serious action cartoon. Like, even things that came out after the serious action cartoon era ended, like Adventure Time and Gravity Falls, I think could still be made better if their tones were more similar to the serious action cartoon mode. It's kind of like the opposite of what's happening now. Whereas now the modern reboots thing, the Teen Titans Go or the Ben 10 reboot, or what would have been Thundercats Roar if they didn't scrap that after the reaction to the first trailer. That,
thank God.
That is a massive step down in quality. Whereas in the early 2000s, when they took over and they revamped an established IP, they unquestioningly made it better. For example, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I don't know how many people have gone back and watched the 80s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but, and I know I'm biased because this is the era I grew up in and stuff, but the 2003 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles stands firm on its own merits. Same thing with the 2002 He-Man or the 2011 Thundercats. These things were objectively improved upon on their own merits and could stand on their own merits, regardless of your previous familiarity with the IP. Whereas now, it's almost gone in reverse. We went from extremely campy, extremely overly simplistic, extremely shit, comparatively, 80s content to serious action cartoons in the late 90s and early 2000s to something that's honestly in many ways more cartoonish than the 80s versions. Like She-Ra, or like the She-Ra show that Netflix did, or again Thundercats Roar. Thundercats Roar as compared to Thundercats 2011 is a perfect example of exactly what I mean here. or the original Glen Arcami Teen Titans as compared to Teen Titans Go. One of these was actually a meaningful step forward regardless of whether you're nostalgic or not. And one of these is an objective step in the wrong direction regardless of if you're nostalgic or not. And I genuinely think that someday in the not too distant future, or maybe in the next 30 years or so, someone is gonna get it in their heads to do a remake of Adventure Time in the style of a Man of Action serious action cartoon or a DC animated universe. And even though Adventure Time is good now, I think Adventure Time made in the style of a serious action cartoon, something along the lines of Gargoyles or something along the lines of He-Man 2002, will be so much better. And it'll be so obvious that this is just objectively a better way of adapting shit. Anyway, moving on.
All right. Dragon Origins. Oh, I read that. That meant that Gator's views were often not very welcome, despite his long tenure at the studio and work on many of its most famous RPGs. May like former Dragon Age. Oh, right. Those are just articles. Okay. That's partly because he says EA didn't think the traditional RPG audience was one that was worth focusing on. He claims that the overseers referred to those mechanics as being in the cave. The cave, he explains, was where nerds went. The nerds were in the cave, you made an RPG, and the nerds in the cave would always show up for an RPG because it was an RPG. That devotion to their chosen game in EA's eyes meant that you didn't have to worry about the nerds. You didn't have to try and appeal to them. You had to worry about people who weren't in the cave, which was the audience we actually wanted, which was much larger.
Oh, for the love of fuck. This is I've said it before and I will say it again because it is so obviously true. This is literally the exact opposite attitude to actually get results. You don't ignore, alienate, and shun your established audience in the hopes of getting a whole bunch of casuals on board. You please your hardcore audience so well that they either convince the casuals to give it a shot, and the casuals can then be won over on its own merits, or those merits will become so overtly present that not even the normiest of the normie can ignore them, and then those normies can be translated over into, if not hardcores, at least less casual viewers. Whereas doing it this way around, doing it the way around that it's described here, of we've already won them over, so we don't have to put any effort into keeping them, is likely to deconvert your hardcore audience and turn them back into casuals, and then your IP crashes and burns, as always happens whenever this is the attitude. How has the MCU fared ever since Phase 4 and 5 as compared to how they fared in Phase 3? How does Star Trek do now as compared to its heyday during the TNG Voyager DS9 era? How is Doctor Who doing now as compared to how it was doing during the tail end of the first Russell T Davies era and the majority of the tenure of the Stephen Moffat era? How is Ben 10 doing right now as compared to how it was doing when Ultimate Alien was still a thing, or when the Worlds Collide crossover or Heroes United crossover was going on? Because I can guarantee you that in every single one of these cases, every single one of these IPs that has been modernized, casualized, and anti-fanified is doing orders of magnitude worse now than they were during the peak of their popularity. Could this be, perhaps, because the peak of their popularity was doing something right that the current stewards of the IP are going deliberately against? Or another example that's from even some of the same people. How do people regard the first Avatar: The Last Airbender series versus how people regard the majority of Korra, for example? Could it be perhaps that the reason why Avatar is still positively regarded now in the first series is because that was something so good that it transcends generations, transcends tastes, and transcends various quality standards, whereas Korra is kind of the redheaded stepchild of the entire family that most people kind of tend to ignore exists in the first place because it does literally the opposite of so many things that worked in the first show and did so on purpose. Moving on.
All right. Uh, really, Geiger clarifies that was the audience that EA wanted, and it basically got what it wanted. Unfortunately for the publisher, the end point of that philosophy was Anthem, a live service effort that flopped entirely at launch and was entirely abandoned within 2 years. Oh yeah, I remember.
In the immortal words of Mick Jagger, you can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometimes, you might find you get what you need. In other words, maybe the reason why you were doing so much more successfully when you cared about the nerds in the cave was because giving a shit about the nerds in the cave was the right thing to do, and shunning, shaming, and deliberately spiting the nerds in the cave in the hopes that the casuals might show up is literally the opposite of what you should be doing. And maybe instead of being calsurprised by your egotistical desire to get what you want at all costs backfiring on you, you might want to reevaluate your desires instead. Like instead of doubling down and tripling down to try and get as many hardcores out of here as possible in the hopes that the casuals will eventually show up, maybe you should realize, oh no, wait, we should have been grateful for the hardcores that we had, and we should do our best to ingratiate ourselves to them whenever possible, instead of treating them like a plague that needs to be expunged so that the sane people can embrace the IP or some shit. Or the moral people in the case of social justice. Fucking hell. Moving on.
All right. The benefit of that was that BioWare was able to refocus somewhat around its single-player RPGs. Last year's Dragon Age, The Veilguard, and the eventual release of Mass Effect 5, although with that release still in pre-production as of this year, it might be some time before we get to see it.
And to emphasize the point that we've been making this entire article through, does anyone even care about what the AAA gaming industry is doing now? Does anyone have any faith in the ability of the AAA gaming media to do anything anymore? Or are we all pretty much in agreement that the only games that are worth paying attention to are the ones that are independently produced, not by corporate bureaucracy? Because that appears to be most people's opinion of the industry, both in games and in Hollywood more generally, is nothing of substance can come from the current corporate bureaucracy, and the only things worth paying attention to are the things that come from the independent scene. Not because of any sort of artistic independent art house snobbery, but because the mainstream of Hollywood and video games are so fucked to death on their own ideological bullshit that they can't produce anything good. All they can do is ruin things that were once good. And I can speak for everyone when I say I'm sick to death of watching things I used to like and care about be raped in front of my very eyes over and over and over again. especially when the person doing it then turns to me and goes in a like smug, pompous affectation, "It was moral that I just ruined everything you loved in front of your very eyes, and I did it on purpose and would do it again gladly because it's the right thing to do." Derp.
What's up? Giant Troll's caught up now.
Ah. Hello, DT.
Alright, sorry, I was just getting the thing ready. So now we're moving on to trailers, which I caught this week.
To be fair, I did catch a trailer, which we will get to next week.
Right. So this is the teaser trailer for Gen V C2. Because we covered the first trailers and stuff and briefly talked about Gen V here and there. I do think it's better than The Boys. I'll be fully honest.
Mm-hmm. I think because it's not quite as overtly cynical as The Boys, and we're actually supposed to be at least somewhat sympathetic to some of the characters some of the time. Granted, there's some stuff baked into the setting that they can't really get rid of full stop, but the characters are a hell of a lot more likable than most of the main cast of The Boys, whether it be the Seven or whether it be the boys themselves.
Yeah, sorry, just give me a sec. I think also is like we're seeing it from the characters in universe perspective. Like they don't know entirely what's going on. You know, they don't know the behind the scenes stuff truly, which
They don't know all the sketchy shit Vought gets up to.
well, given the end of season 1, they possibly do.
Which season 2 will be interesting to see how they adjust to that, for example. Now that for at least to some degree the illusion of Vought being the good guys has been wiped from their eyes, what are they going to do about it?
Yeah. I do also feel like I should mention one of the actors who also played Ambrose in Sabrina, the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, who was in this show, unfortunately did pass about a year ago, I believe.
And it fucks with my head that he was actually younger than me. That's disturbing.
People die every day. It's just a fact of
Right,
reality.
but it's a bit more tragic when someone in their like mid to late 20s dies than it is someone who's, lived a good solid 90 years and has lived a full life. Like as much as I regret, for example, that we lost Betty White, for she was a worldwide treasure. She was 99, so
The actor I'm speaking about is Chance Perdomo. And it from because I did watch this trailer before I sent it or recommended it. And it does seem that they're actually tackling that they're not just writing the character off or recasting him or anything. They are having it be a point made that the character did pass.
they're kind of doing with his character what Wakanda Forever did with Chadwick Boseman's passing and playing with it with T'Challa as well.
Yeah. Shall we?
Yep. Banana.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Good to be back. Thanks for letting me re-enroll. I'm grateful.
You're an eye twitch away from leaping across this table and ripping my throat out with your teeth. I get why you're upset.
Seems a bit. Well, okay, if it's coinciding with season 4 of The Boys, it does make sense that it has a bit of a darker tone than the first season.
And again, given how season 1 ended with kind of the rose-colored glasses being taken off and shattered, now that they know how the sausage is made, at least better than they once did, it does make sense that they would kind of be a bit more angsty about it. Banana?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say. Also, I do want to say this. I feel like this handles the edge better than The Boys as well, because with the Boys, it feels needlessly edgy, right? It feels needlessly like overtly like.
It's just nihilism. Now,
Yeah.
mind you, the show handles it better than the comic, but that's not saying much.
Yeah,
the
no,
the comic hates the superhero genre that it was parodying or trying to parody. But even still, I think this does. Gen V did handle and does appear to be continuing to handle the darker edges of the universe they're in better than its parent show. Banana?
Yeah. I'm just.
After what happened.
Wish there was a fire escape we could climb out of this life. Before us
Stay behind me.
it all burned down.
Hey, you guys!
What the fuck?
It's not worth
Yeah, I do
Better
think
voice.
again, if we got this show first instead of The Boys, like I feel like if this show came out first before The Boys, I feel like we'd be a lot more interested in the world.
True.
Just because like I think it handles the mystery of like stuff because we're not seeing it from effectively the main character's perspective, which are like the boys and stuff like right.
We're seeing it from the side characters who are figuring stuff out alongside the audience, whereas pretty much everyone who needs to know in The Boys
Just knows.
about how things work know, and even when they don't, it's usually because they, and by they I mean Homelander, are sheltered demigods who people are walking on eggshells around.
Okay, Dren Journal brings up an interesting point. They weren't trying to parody; they were trying to satire. There's a difference. Okay, just so we're clear, Dren Journal, are you referring to Gen V and as being the satire? Well, the Boys was being.
I think he was referring to what I said about the comic.
Okay. Which I mean, that's. Yeah, clarify for us, please.
In either case, whether it be satire or whether it be parody, the comic sucks and hates the genre it's in, and that's why, even though The Boys show is still cynical, it is worlds better, especially season 3, is worlds better than the comic it was based on.
Okay, the OG comic. Okay, yeah. Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Okay, so I was right. Good. Banana?
They're not subtle and stuff, like they have Make America Super again, but
Which, I mean, base, but that's neither here nor there.
banana.
Banana.
Saving.
I'm Cypher, your new dean. It is time that humans learn that what runs through our veins is true thought blue.
We're so glad.
Nothing good will come of this. Nothing ever does.
With waiting.
We're gonna burn the school down to the motherfucking studs.
I mean, I'm not blaming Gen V for this. This is just a problem with the commentary they've been trying to do with, Homelander being Trump since season 3. You can't morally grandstand against a supremacist ideology if the beings in question actually are superior to humans. God damn it! Like, this is the problem of trying to do the like superheroes as Nazi allegory thing. When the Nazis were talking about German supremacy and shit, they were utopianly deluded cunts. When superheroes say they are superior to normal humans, they are, for the most part, objectively correct. That doesn't mean they're necessarily morally superior to humans, mind you, but you can't really... This is a problem I've had with The Boys ever since. As much as I think season 3 is probably the best season of The Boys, trying to ham-handedly make Homelander a Trump allegory backfired on them, because when Homelander says he's superior to people, it's kind of hard not to agree, at least like qualitatively, that he is correct. The only thing in his famous I am better speech that I would disagree with him on is the smarter thing. He is not substantively smarter than a normal human. But he is but he is substantively stronger and faster and so on. So like, this is just a pet peeve of mine in general. Dear political hacks who write for superhero comics, stop trying to use superpowered characters to refute supremacist ideology, because they might not be morally superior to people by definition, but they are physically superior to people by definition. And it's harder to make an anti-supremacy argument if the supremacy argument is, accurate and shit. Like, if it's true, that makes the argument a lot stronger than if it's not true. Moving on.
Giant Turtle parodies, lovingly having fun, satire is critical, and usually pushing a message.
Fair play, yes, and thus the overbearing, cynical, nihilistic satire is the problem. But yes.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie. Just because it was me being stupid. I always thought parody was the critical and usually pushing a message, and satire was lovingly having fun.
Yeah, I think that was you having it backwards, my dude.
Yeah, no, I'm.
But yes, for the sake of clarity, Dragon Turtle is correct. In any case, Banana.
Okay. Yeah, and the father of the character Andre, that Chance Perdomo played, who was in the first season.
No, I think you are objectively correct, DT, because I vaguely, now that you reminded me, have heard that distinction made many times. So it's not just you. That appears to be like a definitional standard that most people have when discussing parody versus satire. Anyway, Banana.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say that the dad seems to be having a bigger role here and might even well, it does seem like, because again, they're using they are having that the character did die.
Yeah, they're playing the hand that they were dealt in the same way that Wakanda Forever tried to.
Yeah. I do
Which
think they
honestly good for them. I like when shows incorporate shit like that.
Yeah.
A less morbid example was when they were making Disney's Gargoyles, they couldn't afford like many they couldn't afford many like background voice actors, so they reused the same voice actors multiple times. But rather than just have that be a fluke of the story, they actually interwove that into the in-universe storyline of the story by having Owen Burnett voiced by Brent Spiner and Puck also voiced by Brent Spiner be the same character. Spoilers for Gargoyles for anyone who didn't know that. And they did the same thing with Anastasia Renard and Titania. This is the benefit you can have when characters in your setting can shapeshift and shit, but that's neither here nor there. But my point is that it's good for writers to actually, rather than resent their limitations or their restrictions, actually make the best of them and try to make something of substance using them.
All right.
Banana.
Let's fucking go.
I will be preparing you to push your powers to their fullest potential. You are not students. You're soldiers.
Well, they're doing kind of the dystopian X-Men thing, rather on the nose, aren't they? Kind of reminds me of that one Power Rangers fan film, the really dark one, where the original Mighty Morphin team just straight up admit that no, we were recruited as child soldiers. Do you have anything to add, Brainstormer?
Nah. Although it does, yeah. No. Yeah. You pretty much got it. I don't really have anything else to say.
Banana.
And you will fight.
Bless your hearts and hold on to your butts.
We should run.
What we should be doing is disrupt, break shit, fuck shit up.
Whatever we do it together.
Because of the boys, I know that these characters are not going to get a happy ending. Obviously, from the end of the first season, where they actually tried to be heroes. But fuck, do I want them to just, I don't know, be able to walk away from all this shit or be actual fucking heroes in the end of everything. But
unfortunately, the universe of the boys being what the universe of the boys is, they're probably not going to. But I agree with you. Again, this is the problem of making your characters actually sympathetic in a universe like The Boys, where pretty much no one is sympathetic, or if they're sympathetic in a very indirect way. Which is, if you do actually create sympathetic characters, and then you still have them have the downward spiral ending, it's gonna sting. DT, I wasn't referring to anything actually canon to the Power Rangers franchise. I was talking about a fan film somebody made.
Okay, right. Okay, so DT, it's made by the guy. RPM is great though. and it's similar, but no, it's actually no, it's not similar. Never mind. Rich for that. Yeah, it's Power/Rangers. You can find it on YouTube, unless they took it down. I don't remember. I don't think so. But it's made by the guy Adi Shankar. He's the guy who. Can
Go ahead.
he made the Carl Urban 2012 or 13 Dread movie. He was also responsible for making Castlevania series, and he's also been currently the DMC Devil May Cry Netflix series, which unfortunately I have heard is not great. I didn't watch it.
I didn't know it was made by the same guy who did Dread. Fuck me, he's good. He's good at shit.
And he has okay. Look, I'm gonna be fully honest. I think sometimes the things that he does only work when he's working with like other people who know what the fuck they're doing. Because from what I've gathered, because he's also done like some stuff. He's done like there's a Netflix series called Guardians of Justice, which isn't that great, and he just did the DMC, the Devil May Cry anime on Netflix, and apparently it is not great.
I'm so sorry.
It's not one I was super attached to, but it's still a good series that I think is genuinely interesting and is worth like someone making something good out of it.
I think another parallel might be when Warren Ellis was still attached to Castlevania. That was why the first 4 seasons of the original Castlevania series for Netflix were so good. Whereas Castlevania Nocturne is very much post Warren Ellis, and that's why, especially season 1 of Castlevania Nocturne left a lot to be desired. Granted, it did improve massively in season 2. I think mostly because it was more focused on the characters and the world building in season 2.
Right.
Whereas season 1 tried to make the rebels in the French Revolution the good guys because sympathy basically, and it went badly. But in any case,
okay, so Giant Turtle. That's fair, but also I don't know. You'd have to look up some reviews of it, but from what I've gathered, it kind of a lot of people's issues with it. Not that it was loosely, that it wasn't canon. I don't think that was the issue. I think the issue was it's doesn't really have the soul of Devil May Cry.
Yeah, there's a lot that can be said, I think, on that score. But as far as the Power Rangers fan film, if it's still on YouTube, if it's still on YouTube, one of us can send it to you either individually on Discord, or we can post it in the general chat of the Discord.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't like that. I've stated that before. Like you and I have had a discussion about that short film. I think it's just needlessly edgy and dark, which seems to be in Adi Shankar's wheelhouse. And I'm not gonna.
My issues with it are that I really wish it had been a full movie, because I like I like some of the ideas in the short film, but because it is a short film and it was a short film based very heavily on the ending twist, I feel like maybe if they had given Adi Shankar the Power Rangers movie from like 2017 and he had gotten a full movie's worth.
I disagree. I think. Okay, you have seen it, okay. But I don't know, man. It's just like it feels. I don't know. It's just like
I think it's important to keep in mind that this is an alternate universe.
No, I know, but it still feels. I'm even looking at its own thing as well, and just like I still think it's just needlessly edgy and dark. I get
And-
that's the point, but still, it feels overt, you know.
Right, but I do think that more time to actually build that out. This is what I mean about if it had been a full length movie instead of a short film. I think some of those rough edges might have been able to be, if not softened,
okay,
at least justified more.
Okay, see, the thing is, there is another like Tokusatsu Sentai Power Rangers short film thing called Sentai, and I can find that and send you guys if you want. That has a darker tone to it, and I think handles it far better than the Power/Rangers short film.
That's possible, but again, I wouldn't have. I think I was more on board with the premise of Power/Rangers than you were.
I'm not saying I'm not with the premise. I just don't think it was handled well. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and again, I think some of that might have been alleviated if it had been a full-length feature instead of the short film.
Maybe it could have, but also, again, I think, I don't know, it's something about it rubbed me the wrong way, and I can't fully articulate it, but
it's very possible I could be wrong, and that a full-length version would be even darker and even edgier and even stupider. But the vibe I got was that if they had had more time to play with, and especially a budget to play with, where we could have gotten the quote-unquote real-world renditions of things like the various monsters or Goldar or some of the other stuff. Like, the thing that intrigued me the most about Power/Rangers was, what if Zordon and Rita were played a little bit straighter, and their millennia long feud.
It's okay. Sorry, I just wanted to ask.
The dog got in, and now I have to go and punish him.
That's a good question. It does seem to be a mix. It does seem to be a mix of both. Dragon Troll. Like I said, I'll send it to you.
No, get
and
out.
you can be the judge of it. Again, I think that is a better representation of like a dark Power Rangers story than Power/Rangers. No, that's fair. That you're good. I'm not like. I think they just called it Sentai to be differential, mind you, but also the designs they had for the costumes looked more Sentai-esque. Like, well, okay, that's kind of stupid to say because Power Rangers are technically Sentai, but well, it also depends on what Kamen Rider. I'm gonna be honest. The only Kamen Rider I've seen is that American adaptation, Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, which I actually didn't think was too bad, but mainly I just remember the theme song. But I'll take your word on it, Giant Troll. Like, it's weird. I don't mind dark and edgy, but obviously, like, I think it's kind of become
it's been a crutch, and
yeah,
it's a crutch, and it's become a default, and
oversaturation. I would say an oversaturation. Granted, we've kind of started.
Go ahead.
Granted, I think relatively recently we have started to ease away from that. It's a slow process, mind you, but
I think one of the main issues with dark and edgy that me and Brainstormer in particular have done a lot of work to counteract is there is a temptation in dark and edgy stories to go with the nihilistic everyone dies, everyone is miserable, and everything is miserable at the end. I think a lot of the issues with dark and edgy stories could be resolved by having things be dark and edgy, but also have them balanced with a happy ending that feels earned because of all the trials and tribulations that the characters go through. Like that is probably the defining characteristic of most of the things me and Brainstormer do. We put our characters through all the ringers, but we also usually don't go for the nihilistic downer ending. We put our characters through every flavor of shit imaginable, and then we have them have a happy ending, which they earn by way of their character growth and by way of going through the various trials they undergo. I think if you can separate dark and edgy from nihilism, then it can work better. But the problem is, both like academically and intellectually and artistically, a lot of artists in today's day and age think nihilism is the adult's perspective, and that anyone who has any sort of idealism at all is a childish, emotionally driven moron. And what we need to do is we need to remind people that happy endings do happen, like in real life and shit. Like, just because the world is sometimes dark doesn't mean there can't be happiness found in it.
Okay. That's actually a good point trying to raise up. I think you're describing badly made grimdark. They're dull, not edgy. The point of grimdark is that you aren't just going to make the world better at the end of the story, or if you do, it is one step on a long road.
Well, and a lot of storytelling in today's day and age can't differentiate between edge and grimdark because of the aforesaid nihilism is the adult's position bullshit. Anyway, Banana.
Yeah, let me get to the... Okay. Give me a sec. Okay. There we go.
What really happened to my son?
You have no idea what you're dealing with.
Let's go. 3, 2.
Sophomore year is gonna be lit.
Oh, the high school. Hey,
College.
but still. It's a reminder that we are still dealing with, like, Zoomer or... No, they're not young enough to be Gen Alpha, but we're dealing with Zoomer college kids, so... Which, to be fair, that can work. I still maintain, for example, that the Magicians did this really well, where, yes, the main characters are all kind of vapid, narcissistic millennials, but they don't confirm or deny whether that self-involvement and that narcissism is a good thing or not, and they just as often mock the shallow millennial hipster bullshit as often as they sincerely reference it, which makes the Magicians awesome. But anyway, moving on. Banana.
September 17th. Oh, we got a long way to wait. A teaser trailer that's actually more or less a teaser and is long enough away that it's not just the first trailer. That's actually impressive.
Unfortunately, DT, this is this is the other thing about the modern like art school mentality. They shoot for irreverent nihilism, but because they're so overbearingly moralistic, a la social justice, they can't actually be irreverent. Because to be irreverent would mean being willing to question your own authoritarian moralism as well, and social justice don't play like that. That's the problem. You can't be irreverent if your own pathologies require you to be a moralistic cunt.
Sorry, I'm just getting the next thing ready. So if I'm quiet, that's why.
Yeah, that's a very good parallel. I'm allowed to be irreverent about everyone else's bullshit, but don't you dare say that my bullshit should be held to the same standard.
Okay. So this was okay. To be fair, I sent both trailers, but this was something that just came out of the blue, and I thought we could cover because it kind of fits with James Bond thing, and fits with Dawn's thing, and it fits kind of similar to me because I wouldn't say I'm not a James Bond fan. It's just like I've kind of been in that era where like I know Daniel Craig would have been the one that I would have technically grown up with, but I just never got into James Bond.
Yeah, your generation kind of got screwed with because of the whole Daniel Craig thing. Like, Casino Royale, I would genuinely defend as a good movie. But that was the last good James Bond movie, as far as I'm concerned. And the attempt to, like, make the James Bond franchise overly dramatic, overly self-serious, and overly grounded, quote-unquote, missed so much of the point. Now, mind you, and I've said this before and I will say it again, the Pierce Brosnan era of James Bond went whole hog in the opposite direction and went way too far into the like campy pulpy aspect. But that being said, that doesn't mean that we therefore have to defend Daniel Craig from being. And this is one of the things that pisses me off about the Daniel Craig era of James Bond so much. Because the Jason Bourne series was so successful, heaven knows why, but because the Jason Bourne franchise was so successful, they did their best to turn James Bond into Jason Bourne. And as a result, most of James Bond lost its soul for most of the entirety of the Daniel Craig era. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to go all the way back to the Pierce Brosnan era because that's wrong in the opposite extreme.
Okay, but just so I can finally pull up the thing.
Yeah.
There is a game. So this is an announcement trailer for a James Bond video game that is not tied to any movie coming out, but is its own original thing from the guys who made the Hitman games, IO Interactive. It is 007 First Light announcement trailer.
Yeah, that too, DT. As much as I never thought I would see myself quoting or referencing this particular dude, in the Screwtape letters, C.S. Lewis actually does a really good job defining the difference between irreverence or the joke proper, as he calls it, and flippancy. And a lot of people in the modern world seem to mistake irreverence for being flippant and dismissive about every fucking thing. Being flippant is not the same as being irreverent, and that is one of the main issues of today's artistic day and age. Anyway, moving along.
Right. Dawn has not seen this yet, so we are going to get his live reaction. Again, I do want to preface this mainly because it's not Dawn's thing in terms of video games. It's like a third-person action adventure game. You know, some people have compared it. Obviously, like elements of Hitman come in here, which is like it did a lot of espionage stuff in terms of the gameplay and like stealth and all that, and things of that nature. Disguises even. Also a mix of Uncharted with like some of the combat and movement and gunplay.
Mm-hmm.
So keep that in mind,
Mm-hmm. I hope there's at least some like segments or some subplots that become first-person shooters, because like James Bond video games were some of the first-person shooters out there, and it would be nice to get an homage to them. But I don't need the entire game to be a first-person shooter to work that out. You can just have like a puzzle mechanic that can be resolved by.
When you're aiming down the sight, it does go first person of like a gun. So
okay, so that's nice.
Yeah.
Anyway, shaken, not stirred.
What's the drink that he always orders, or is it just shaken, not stirred?
But the James Bond cocktail is a vodka martini.
I almost just want to say martini, but okay. Anyway, yeah. I guess we'll just do shaken, not stirred.
Shaken, not stirred.
His parents cut their own rope to save him. He watched them fall, then found his way off that mountain. He was 11 years old.
He then started a grand tour of every major boarding school in Britain.
Always at the top of his class.
Always at odds with authority. Same thing in the Navy.
Being in opposition to authority is generally based where humans are concerned. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, because you told me you have the James Bond, like, except for like 1 or 2 books, right?
Yes, I have all but 2 of the original Ian Fleming books in paperback.
So I'm just curious on the character of Bond. Does that sound?
We don't get much of his backstory, but as far as the like standoffish iconoclastic rebellion against authority thing, that is very much kind of Bond's thing. Because James Bond in his original format is a pulp hero, so he often chased against authority, even authorities that he likes, like M. So
also
that does
might or might not be based off both Ian Fleming. Well, maybe Christopher Lee, the actor who was also a spy during World War II, or Ian Fleming, possibly. Not sure on that one.
Ian Fleming folded some of his real world experience into the Bond books. He obviously turned everything up to 11 because pulp hero, but yeah, he did base a lot of kind of the inside knowledge necessary to make Bond as compelling as it turned out to be.
I did recently find this out.
His friends' experiences.
So this is supposed to be M, and the guy who is like being hypercritical of Bond is supposed to be a character named Greenway or Greenwood. Are those substantial characters in the Bond novels? Or I know M is, obviously.
I don't remember Greenwood offhand, but it's been a minute since I've read the books. It's been quite a while since I've looked into Bond.
They could have also taken some elements from like the other books that were written by like other authors, because some books have gone into his origin.
That is true, and I don't have a point of reference to those.
Okay.
I got all but 2 of the Bond Bond books for Christmas one year. That's how I got most of those. I don't even remember. I'm pretty sure the box containing all of the Bond books is still in my closet somewhere, but I'd have to go and dig it out. Anyway, shaken, not stirred.
Right. But it does, for one thing, the way they're talking about him obviously is well, it's interesting because again, it's said here that he's brilliant, he's exceptional, but again, he does not follow authority well.
He's a pulp hero. This is a very very common motif among pulp heroes, especially in like a noir context. Which Bond isn't quite noir, but he fits in alongside a lot of the noir protagonists, I think.
Right, and this is kind of supposed to be even before Casino Royale. Like this is actually supposed to be like his first ever.
Yeah, his origin story.
Yeah, where he's being recruited into the 00 program.
Yeah, how he got to the point of being the legend that they send to deal with things. Anyway, shaken, not stirred.
Yeah.
His superiors all praise his instincts.
And they're all in need of early retirement. Nobody knows what to do with him, Mom.
No, and I suspect he feels the same way. But what he did in Iceland...
What he did in Iceland was insubordination. It was ill-disciplined, utterly reckless. He only survived thanks to blind luck.
Isn't that how he always works, though?
I mean, yes, that is not only Bond, but that is pretty much every noir detective or pulp hero that I'm aware of. There is a reason, for example, DT, why Harry Dresden is the White Council's wild card. This is not an uncommon motif.
But I like how they're also keeping it very cinematic. Like the game, like the cutscenes and stuff. Like it looks like something you'd see in a movie itself, even.
In answer to your question, DT, I would oppose the members of the High Table, but I would do so from within the context of hospitality politicking them where possible. My issue with the High Table and most human authority is that it does not successfully live by its own standard. This is why I am much more willing to bend the knee to non-human authorities, because in most non-human cases, in order to be in a position is to be qualified for that position. To be a fairy queen or a fairy king, for example, you wear the mantle of the crown, and the mantle of the crown makes you the sort of entity who can best take it up in many ways. It's a symbiotic chicken and egg thing. Whereas humans are less consistent than I wish they were. And while every great now and again you get the one true king, you get your Rudolph II or your Elizabeth I or your Charlemagne's and so on. For every couple of them, or for every 1 out of 100 monarchs that end up being like them, you get 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 King Johns, Caligulas, and Neros, and so on. So that is why my standard is, where human authorities are concerned, it is almost always a good idea to be irreverent in the face of authority. Where non-human entities are concerned, they are exempt from my scorn because they, by definition, deserve their role, or they would not be in it. There is no such thing as a not true king where non-human entities are concerned, or at least I have never run across such a thing in my occult research. Whereas, unfortunately, the Richard the Lionhearts are massively outnumbered by the King Johns, and therefore fuck the authorities where humans are concerned. Moving on. Shaken, not stirred.
Let me read the tab.
Give me one good reason to put him in the program, Mom.
I think you just covered them all, Greenway. It's really quite simple. Bond is a bullet without a target. Let's give him one.
Okay, if nothing else, I love the way M is written here. I adore the way M is written here. And how
So we
she's-
get the shot of, for one thing, it does. I feel like that is James Bond to a T, a bullet without a target.
It also describes, well, the majority of pulp protagonists, and in particular, I am reminded of a exchange between Harry Dresden and his air spirit servant Bob, where Harry asks why Queen Mab wants him to be the Winter Knight. And Bob's response is, well, you are kind of an avatar of the phrase, things fall apart. She can't quite be sure what happens, but she can be certain that there will be a massive explosion and a giant pile of ash afterwards. You're like her guided missile. You're a big dumb bunker buster. That's what that immediately made me think of.
So we get the look of Bond here, which I looked this up. Apparently, it's the guy who played the young Dexter in Dexter Original Sin. Is gonna be playing him?
Well, that show had problems, but I get what you're saying, and that's not a bad choice to play Bond.
I've heard a lot of people say that the actor actually did a really good job playing Dexter.
No, he did. Question though, does that mean that the actor who played
Apparently, he's actually British. Yeah.
Okay, so that's yet another case of British actors are better at mimicking American accents than Americans are at mimicking British accents.
Right.
Well,
and I recently learned this, and don't feel free to confirm this. They gave him the facial scar that apparently Bond has described in the books.
Yes, sir. I can understand why in like old Hollywood they didn't want to give Bond his scars, because especially back in the day, scars and ugliness were considered to kind of be visual cues for villainy. But it is nice that someone went back and referenced the source material. Fan service, motherfuckers, do you speak it? But anyway, shaken, not stirred.
Yeah. Let me just get back to the time we were at. And it does seem like it's kind of it is somewhat set contemporarily, but also kind of a heightened modern day.
Well, I mean, obviously it has to be to some degree modern day, because I believe the first couple iterations of M were male, although don't quote me on that.
Well, it's like it's his own whole thing, though. It's like I'm feeling like they can do whatever, but I think because of like some of the sets or some of the locations they have in here, and so like I believe some of the tech they're using, like some of the gadgets and stuff, are a little more high tech.
Mm-hmm.
So
it is nice to see them like throw the old school MGM logo in here. That's a nice touch. Like it's kind of meta, but it's meta in a way that makes me happy instead of making me groan. So like this is how you meta properly, goddammit. But anyway, shaken, not stirred.
Alright.
Do you have an appointment?
The name's Bond.
James Bond. He's with me.
And you are?
don't think we've had the pleasure.
Now let's not get ahead of ourselves, James.
So you shouldn't have.
So we got.
Okay, I hope the aesthetics of the actual gameplay are as nice as these cinematics seem to be implying.
Oh yeah, we're
'cause-
seeing a bit of gameplay just now, but okay, so we get an old Q, which I'm cool with. I mean, I don't mind. I think a younger Q for an older James Bond is interesting, and I was fine because honestly, the two actors, I know Daniel Craig and the actor who played the young Q, I thought they had really good like banter and back and forth, more or less. But I'm fine with an older Q.
I actually prefer an older Q because his whole purpose is to be the smart guy who understands how all the gadgets work and explains them to James. So like, I don't mind the younger Q. The younger Q as a concept is fine, but I do prefer a Q who is either same age as Bond or older than Bond.
And he's being given Omega watches. Is that important?
There are a lot of gadgets that Bond has that are disguised as watches. They've updated what his watches can do multiple times and given him multiple different models.
Someone mentioned that Omega watches are like an iconic brand for James Bond. So
yeah, they're pretty much every time Bond gets a watch-based gadget, that's the brand they have. It's kind of implied to be an in-house brand, specifically for MI6.
Interesting. But yeah, okay, watch gadgets. That's always fun.
Yep.
Apparently that one turns on a flamethrower for a exhaust port of a dirt bike.
A lot of Bond's vehicles have had that gimmick in them. Like, obviously, as a Bond fan, the first thing I can think of is Bond's famous, Aston Martin, which I believe also had flamethrower exhaust port at the back. I know it had like guns and machine guns in the headlights, but I'm pretty sure it also had a flamethrower in the back, or at least some versions of it do.
The working with that little scene before with him talking to the female agent or whoever it was, being flirty and the cockiness and all that. I think that's James Bond again. Like, Dawn, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Something.
What happened?
Did I glitch out or go quiet or whatever?
I think yeah, you did.
Okay, I was just asking with James Bond speaking to the female agent or whoever that was, because we didn't get a name or anything. Being flirty, that's like usual James Bond, right? Like,
I think that's supposed to be Moneypenny, who is usually Bond's like secretary, kind of.
I mean, again, we didn't get a name, so I was gonna say Moneypenny, but I'm not gonna unless I get confirmation, I'm not gonna say anything.
Yeah, Bond has basically a whole new love interest for every book almost. And as time has gone on, they've given Moneypenny more and more badassery in her own right. So I don't know if they're going that route or not. But in any case, shaken, not stirred.
Don't ever try to do a British accent, man. It doesn't work for you.
Bollocks.
You're American. Be fucking American.
I will be whatsoever I feel like being, and you can saw right off.
Okay. Shaken, not stirred.
We're facing a situation of the utmost delicacy. I need all my pieces on the board.
009 is a master manipulator. Whatever the end game is, we won't see it coming.
Okay, so this is an agent that went rogue then. That's interesting.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie. The thing I always wanted to know about the James Bond universe are like the other 00s. Like, there's not much mention of them, mind you, but I would, because, okay, for one thing, James Bond is 007, which means
there are 6 other people who out badass him apparently.
Yeah. I am genuinely curious who the fuck is 001, because that guy has to be a fucking legend.
I mean, there is a theory that M is the position someone takes up when 001 retires. The veracity of that theory is somewhat dubious, mind you, but I've always kind of liked that fan theory that when a 001 retires, they take up the position of M.
That would be interesting. Which would imply Judi Dench's character from like Pierce Brosnan to Daniel Craig would have been that would explain the badassery, actually. Then also,
I mean, how can you go wrong with badass Judi Dench?
Well, that would also explain Ralph Fiennes then, as well. And could also make mention. Well, to be fair, it was made mention that he was tortured by the IRA. I believe in Skyfall, and the mention of him.
I will take your word for it, because I make a point not to watch the Daniel Craig movies more than once if I can feasibly help it. With the exception of Casino Royale, which again is fine.
Anyway. Yeah, we're seeing some gameplay here. Nothing too crazy. It's very simple stuff. Although it does seem, I remember hearing this like earlier today. I was looking up stuff about it. It has like kind of that open sandbox missions of like you can either go like the more action adventure, like shoot 'em up kind of style, or like stealthy spy agents wise. Basically, anyone who plays this game, like the story or whatever, is going to be a different experience throughout. So, I think that's cool. Because, I mean, it does combine, like, yeah, it combines the
jet lag. Gets me every time.
She's not your friend, Bond. She's an asset.
With respect, Mom. To hell with that.
And then he's going to get betrayed and regret that immediately, because that's what always happens with Bond and the Femme Fatales. Oh, God. You never learn, James. I know this is early days for you in this particular timeline, but you never learn, James. Oh, like, if I had a dime for every if I had a nickel for every time Bond simped over the femme fatale only to regret it later, I would have a lot of nickels. Wouldn't have all the nickels because there are female characters, of course, who Bond does actually get meaningful connections with, and so much the better. But there are a lot of femme fatales who use his simping to their advantage, and it blindsides him a lot in a lot of these. Is what I'm saying. Shaken, not stirred.
Yeah. And we get a driving as well, which, I mean, car chases kind of seem given how cars play a big role in James Bond franchise. At least
Yeah, and some of the coolest gadgets in the Bond canon are augments to his car. Anyway, shaken, not stirred.
Yeah.
Tell me, what do you do, James?
Lately, headhunting.
Globetrotting. It's, again, just a lot of exotic locations. Is cool.
It's Bond.
Yeah.
Bond doing Bond things for Queen and country.
Also, they're using
Sorry, what system does this come out on?
Basically all of them. I can get this on Xbox, so.
Okay, well then I am going to have to see if my brother will let me borrow one of his old Xboxes.
Well, I think it's PlayStation, Xbox. Like you can also do computer as well.
Yeah, I assume there's a desktop version.
Yeah, like you can get like on Steam or Epic Games, I believe.
Well, that's good. But yeah, I am reasonably impressed with this, actually.
I'm not gonna lie, man. I legitimately thought you were just gonna say it's shit. You know, given you.
And yeah, you are surprised when I bugger off and go British a bit, even though you know how posh and pretentious I can be at times.
Yeah, but you can't do a British accent.
I can, I'm just not choosing to at the moment.
No, you cannot. It's incredibly bad.
It also depends on which British accent I'm doing. Like,
can you do Welsh, Cockney, Southern Wales?
I can't do Cockney because it feels wrong in my mouth.
Irish, Scottish. I mean, you're part Scottish. Come on.
I can do both of those. Although I will say, I have mixed them up before, and that is why I will never do them around a Scottish or Irish person because I don't want to get kicked in the head.
I think emulating an accent of someone's native language is a bit insulting, regardless. But
I mean, most Scottish and Irish people speak English. I mean, there is also Gaelic, but even most Irish and Scottish people don't speak their respective forms of Gaelic as a first language most of the time. The Welsh are slightly more inclined to use Welsh wherever they can get away with using it, it seems, but even they would probably still consider English to be their first language. In any case, shaken, not stirred.
I did want to point out the theme seems to be an orchestral version or some type of like modernization, epicified, epic version of Her Majesty's Secret Service theme.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder if you picked up on that.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely there. I would have liked to have seen if they could have done one for for this particular game, because like obviously there are themes and motifs that crop up all the time because it's Bond, but
I am curious.
some of the best songs in the franchise are songs that were specifically made for specific movies. For example, Goldfinger's song.
Right. Although it makes me curious though. Do you think just because James Bond is media adapted from the books or media adapted adaptations are nothing without an opening credits?
This is true.
So I am genuinely curious if
they did their own custom title sequence.
Title things. Either as the opening to playing the game, like the opening menu to the game when you start it up, or when you press start to play the game and it plays after a tutorial.
If I were them, what I would do is make a longer title sequence for when you click start, and then make a shorter version to act as like background for the menu. If I were them, that's what I would
actually
do.
Yeah, that would work.
But then again, title sequences have apparently become a lost art form, so who knows?
No, video games do them often.
This is true. They're more common in video games than they are in movies, which shame on Hollywood for that. But
yeah. Anyway.
Shaken, not stirred.
Yeah. Come on. There we go. Overly convoluted trap. Yeah, that's James Bond.
Yeah, the no, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die thing.
Although being feeding alligators is a new one.
I mean to be fair, Bond is like the patient zero for convoluted death traps.
Yeah.
If it were not James Bond, we would not have Perry the Platypus. So there's that. Which just makes me, I'm sorry, but my brain immediately wanted to think of what would James Bond equivalent of a platypus, Perry the Platypus, be? I can't think of one because there's not a distinctive thing that someone could call Bond without realizing it was Bond, and then
yeah,
repair when it was real.
Bondsman.
Yeah, but his name notwithstanding, that's not really one of Bond's duties.
Anyway, staying not stirred.
Shaken, not stirred.
I suppose this is another teachable moment.
Coming 2026.
Okay, yeah, I'm actually kind of looking forward to this.
Oh, the tag. Tagline is "Earn the number."
That is a good tagline for a James Bond origin story. Okay. Speaking of this question, does Bond not yet have his license to kill? So are we gonna have to go around like seeking non-lethal ways to handle this shit in this game?
I have no idea. This could have been when he just got made at 007.
This is also true, but I kind of would obviously be more of a comedic beat than a dramatic one, but I wouldn't mind seeing a James Bond game where, due to his, lack of reputation as yet, he doesn't have his license to kill, and so you have to actually actively look for non-lethal ways to disarm your enemies and shit. It'd be an interesting gimmick, given that the origin story thing is supposedly the gimmick of this particular game.
And it looks like, I don't know if this is pre-order. Well, it looks like if you sign up to an IOI's account to unlock on-duty outfit skin, the Golden Wraith weapon skin, the Walther PPK, similar to like GoldenEye gun, or what was that character that Christopher Lee played in that one movie? The Man with the Golden Gun was I think the title of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's wearing honestly kind of reminds me of Archer. The holster strapped with a turtleneck.
Well, I mean, to be fair,
I know that was taken from Bond, wasn't it?
It's definitely one of Bond's default looks. Like, most people, when they think of Bond, probably think of his, evening wear, bow tie, etc. And bow ties will forever be based and cool. But being that as it may, he only really does the like formal attire thing when he's infiltrating a formal setting. He doesn't like as much as the iconography of Bond in the evening wear is the thing everyone thinks of. That's only because it's like set, or it was originally set in like the 30s, and a lot of espionage type shit happens in like nightclubs and so on. Back on the topic of his license to kill thing, I'm just imagining like a comedic beat where like he knocks out a bunch of random henchmen and ties them up, and then after they wake up, there's like a little business card thing where it goes, I am sorry, I do not yet have my license to kill, so as much as I would have liked to have killed you, all I could do was incapacitate you.
I'm not sure, because some of the action scenes look like he was taking people out, so.
Yeah, obviously it makes more sense for him to just kill them, but like, there's a part of me that, like, in a like Get Smart parody style, would have liked to have seen a James Bond style badass having to go out of his way not to kill or like non-lethally wound and shit because he doesn't have the license to kill yet, and he doesn't want to have to deal with M's paperwork. Just imagine a scene at the beginning of the thing where M is scolding him. You do not yet have clearance to kill, Mr. Bond, so do not kill under any circumstances that aren't life-threatening.
All right. I guess with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, avidazai, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
shalom. Be seeing you and fuck off.